call this special meeting to order at 10 o'clock.
Roll call. Mr. McPhail?
Here.
Miss Tiley? Here. Tiley? Here. Miss Coots? Here. Christine Newman?
Here.
Mr. Horner?
Here.
Diane?
Here.
Dennis?
Well, Mr. Lane,
Yeah, there are no adjustments to the agenda either.
Do we need to add your contract?
It's not actually a voted item, all we have to do is sign it, so,
Okay.
we can sign it now, or we can sign it at the end, or whatever the pleasure
Maybe you better do it now.
of the council
There's a spelling, there's a spelling
Somebody
error
changes
in
their
there.
mind.
is. Is there?
And this is just, it's picky, but this is coming out of the law office, there's, I'm trying to tell you what page it is. That it means something else in the law. Okay, it's Article 5.3, lesser notice, they've got LESSOR, that means, that has to do with lesser or lessee. You know, that needs to be LESSER, needs to get changed, right?
sure.
Yeah, cause that's a lease person.
That's
Yeah.
a lease term, yeah.
We're not leasing you.
No, can't afford the upkeep.
You're right. Okay. So maybe what I'll do is,
Unless you're gonna pay your own taxes.
I would just scratch across it with
put
a
in
pen
Put in the correct word.
and put in LESSER. I just don't like anything where somebody's gonna hang something up in court over nonsense, you know what I'm saying?
Well, you know, she read it, don't we?
We do, I didn't
Yeah.
touch that at all, but
I read stuff, I hate to tell you.
you're the legal person, so.
and then when I read it, I caught a date that was wrong.
Okay, and that was,
It was in, Article 4.1, and it's actually changed on this, so it was April 1st there, but it was inconsistent with the previous date that they had for the agreement to go into effect. So I just added it in there.
so you just scratched it out and put February 1st.
Yep, I had the document, so I just changed it and I put a little,
He actually changed
I
it.
actually
Checked it
changed it.
different.
Oh, okay.
So on the
So you
agreements
just
that
let
we
me
will
know.
sign, it's correct.
So it's correct in the way it is now?
It is, yes.
Alright, well then it's,
Yep, I just wanted to make sure that I let everybody know, cause I didn't wanna make a change to it and not tell you guys, so I flagged it. So if, when we sign it, Mr. President, you wanna look at it, it's there for you to see in the yellow. And I got two of them, to sign, one for you guys and one for me.
I'm glad we have that taken care of, then we don't have to worry about it February 1st date.
You sure we're gonna do this, guys?
So I'm cupcakes. I tripped on the way out the door this morning and the cupcakes kind of went flying.
Over in the koi pond?
Not doing too well on my feet the last 2 days.
The squirrels like you.
Yeah,
I bet the dog,
Yeah.
you let the dog out there, no, he goes in the,
Squirrels will be
I
going
can't,
100 miles
Lucy's
an
in
hour.
here right now, she
Oh,
doesn't go
oh,
outside.
yeah.
She's in the house at all times.
when did you get her fixed?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we had the fenced in the back,
I know you do, yeah, yeah.
but I don't let her out in the front because I do not do puppies.
They're a lot of work, yeah, yeah. One is enough.
Yep, I gotta sign
Yeah, you guys come over and take down that tarp over that wood. It's just blowing the wind, it's been a lot of money in that raw wood that's on that trailer. And I don't have room in the garage for it.
Exactly.
I put rocks and big bunch of water, round up everything I had. Pulled right out from the.
Yeah, it was yellow, I think it's
old.
old. I know, they were trying to get in there, and I don't know right in the back, oh, that's, well, yeah, it's been, idea.
Well, man, it's good to know you'll be here.
it.
I
It is.
know there's a nice little house coming up for sale too.
Is there?
Or
You
more.
know where, you don't know where Al Smith lived on the corner of Hatchet and the highway down there? The kids are gonna sell his, it's an older home, but they're gonna sell Al Smith's.
Probably is.
Right on the very end, it's like a little ranch.
Right
The blue
across
one,
from
or is
No.
that the gray?
It's the white one, right on the
Except he's
corner.
got a dog.
I do have a dog.
Oh, you have to put a fence.
He has a
Yeah.
large dog.
Yeah, you have a big
Can't put him
dog.
next to the highway.
Nope.
Well, yeah,
It's
you'd
like
have to
60
set something in for him, yeah. Yeah, I didn't think
No,
about that.
he doesn't run away currently where I live.
Oh, but you never know what he
But,
might see
but,
out
uh,
there.
but
Yeah, yeah.
he's a German short hair pointer, so
Oh,
he's got the
okay,
sniffs,
yeah,
and he goes everywhere, following scents all the
Yeah.
time.
yeah, well, that's
what
what
I
he's
found
bred
works
to
good.
do.
Get you a
Is
cell
that
phone
on my side
nylon
of the road
runner.
or on
Routes
the
through
other?
the
On your
backyard.
side of the road,
On
right
a
on
pit
the
bull,
corner
and she
of
goes
the
out to the end of
highway.
it, does her thing, comes back.
Like the road.
He actually
and
doesn't
then
like being
paint
outside.
it.
He goes
Yeah,
out,
he
goes
does.
They
potty.
do just their job and come back.
Come
Oh,
back.
okay.
Yeah.
She
it's
didn't
a
even
shed
go out
out
this
there and it's
morning,
got a
usually she
garage.
goes with
Yeah,
her.
he passed and,
Oh,
the
I didn't
kids
know
were
that.
there, so I heard, the kids were there.
Well,
and
they
they
had
s-
couple on our
they
street,
said
too.
that they will,
Yeah,
put
some
it in
around
the
town.
spring and then sell it.
I'm writing on my grocery
Yeah,
list.
you
Mr.
have to
President.
put fence
Okay.
around that.
Ready?
Okay, no,
Let's
Contact
get moving on our
Yeah.
proposed budget goal setting.
So, I know we have scheduled till like 2 o'clock, but I don't think it's gonna be that long. We're just gonna do a quick presentation and then just start talking about our goals for the next year, council's goals for the next year. So for the new people, and Chris, you can probably take a nap if you like.
Thank you.
No,
We're
it's
just gonna-
chance.
we're-
Budget setting?
Well, this isn't, well, I guess let me preface, this meeting is not about numbers. This is about overall strategic goals for the next year. The numbers, meeting will be in February when we start talking about that stuff. And that one will be a long meeting like it was last year where I go through
Each
the
piece, okay.
funds and all of that stuff. So right now, we haven't done anything with numbers because most of the things we need aren't ready yet. So we don't have our healthcare numbers, we don't have our insurance numbers yet, we don't have a lot of stuff, so there isn't a lot of work done in the accounts yet, just because of the nature of the timing of our budget system, so, that will be pretty much coming between now and the February meeting. So we'll be working pretty hard on that once we get all the numbers. It's always a crunch to get that stuff together, so. But as we think about the budget, we wanna look back at what our goals and objectives are. So 3 years ago, council approved this as their mission and vision statement. So when you think about budgeting, generally, you try to use this as the lens through which you look to create your budget.
Who came up with the term outdoor oasis?
Don't remember.
We all did.
We all did.
Yeah,
It sounds like Doug Holland.
Well, he was here.
yeah, he was, yeah.
Okay.
So that's it, to be a welcoming, desirable community for families to call home, to be environmentally conscious, family friendly, and to be an outdoor oasis with sustainable public services in the Great Lakes Bay region. It's very flowery, but, when you think about really what it means, I think it does kind of reflect, when I experienced St. Charles, it does kind of reflect the values of the community a little bit. You know, we're close to the flats, we've got, you know, we put in LED streetlights for, you know, environmentally friendly stuff. We're working on education, at the Waterfowl Park with flowers and stuff, so it kind of matches, so. That's it, laugh if you want, but,
No, I just, every time, the Bad River is my particular peak here. That, I've watched that, and I've lived here 51 years, and I've watched that just shrink. You know, it used to be a viable river, and I don't think there's anything outdoor oasis-y about that Bad River.
yeah.
I wish we could find a way to get it dredged, and I have talked to many, many different people who say it's just not going to happen. But it's just not, it's not good anymore. It would be nice if it were,
It
place where you
would,
could put
it
your
would
boat
be,
in,
yeah.
and go, we used to go down in a relatively big boat every spring. They called it Spring Run, as a matter of fact, but anyway, sometimes it wasn't too pleasant. But anyway, to go down the Bad River and go all the way down the Saginaw River and then go out to the bay, you know, and then come back, and you can't do that now. And I think that's a shame.
Yeah, they do it. You
In
don't
both
go out
sides
to
of
the bay,
Oakdale,
do you? Go to Saginaw River?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they go to Saginaw River all the time on the.
But in a smaller
Yeah,
boat.
but not from here.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
From here?
they
From
do.
here,
Yeah,
what size
yeah.
boat?
We went down on a pontoon once, so.
Okay.
It,
It's
would
just,
like to
there's
see it
certain
dredged,
spots of the
absolutely.
river
and
that,
cleaned up, you
And
know.
cleaned up, yeah,
Yeah.
so that it was because they
My
just,
husband belonged to
And
the
they-
Edinburgh Sportsman's Club, and they went down there and took more junk out of that river.
Yeah, and the DNR works with, I mean, if you find logs and stuff like that, they
Right.
work with
we
the
had a
Help you.
group,
boaters, yeah.
we had a group of people in the fall go down, probably 20, 30 of us, and with chainsaws
Yeah.
and pull stuff out ourselves.
don't tell.
We are being recorded.
I love to see it dredged, I
Oh,
really
I
would
do too.
love to see it dredged.
So the goals and objectives are the lens we use, and this is kind of what a budget is. So if you aren't familiar, this is what the General Law Village Handbook says a budget is. And it's a plan of financial operation for a given period of time, including an estimate of all proposed expenditures and a proposed means of financing those expenditures, which in other words is revenue. So you're talking revenue and expenditures, and that is the basic concept of a budget. In public budgeting, governmental budgeting, we have what's called the fund accounting system. And that's because a lot of the revenue we get is legally restricted for one purpose or another. So in the private sector, you have separate companies that receive their revenue and they budget just that. Income statements, outgoing expenditures, and that's it. But so since we have differing sources of revenue, like taxes, but we also get money from the state for roads and Act 51, we have to separate those sources into their own little buckets, if you will. And that's why we have so many funds. When you look at the budget, you have 101, 202, 203, 204, and I think we have a lot of separate, legally separate accounting systems for each source of revenue. So, what's our general fund? Our general fund is kind of like our only fund that can be spent on anything council decides they wanna spend it on. Most people find the general fund to be the most important, because if any of the other funds in the government are having trouble, that general fund has to pick up the slack and pay for it. So, some communities have deficits in their major streets or local streets. When they have that, they have to submit a plan to the state, and part of that generally ends up being that the general fund has to provide some money for a short period of time so that they can pay all their bills. And the general fund in the village is the only fund that can do that. So, as a result, most auditors, most communities try to safeguard the general fund in each year, but also the general fund balance, which is basically the savings account for that fund. Because in a rainy day, that's really where you go to try to keep up with everything. So, in the village, we have different fund types, and this is where the fund accounting comes into place. The general fund, it contains our general operating millage, which is your property taxes, and our tax rate at the moment is 15 mils, which includes, it's an odd number, and I never remembered off the top of my head, it's like 12.396 or something.
12.8025.
That. And then
How do you
the,
remember that?
Oh, it's just in there, I mean,
Yeah, that's never gonna go away.
Yeah.
that's been there for 35 years.
She'll be on her dying bed and that will come out of her mouth, guaranteed.
2.80 what?
12.8025.
12.8025.
it rolls right off the tongue.
Yeah.
It includes our state shared revenue, goes to the general fund, so that's money we get from sales tax from the state. Permits and fees, so any building permits and things like that go to the general fund. ordinance fines, so if we write a parking ticket or a light violation, anything like that, goes into the general fund. And revenue that you don't have any idea where it should go generally would go to the general fund. We have a series of special revenue funds in the village as well. Act 51 is our streets money that we get from the state, and that comes from the gas and weight tax that we pay at the pump and also through our driver's license fees. We get that money from the state to help us keep up on our roads. We have a street.
Based on the number of miles of roads we have.
It is, yeah, and every year the state sends us a map and says, hey, do you have any
Right,
changes to
change it.
your map? We currently, well, the most recent map has 15 miles of road on it. Our next map is gonna have more because we did industrial park project. And we found actually a couple spans of streets that were not included in our map, so the calculation for next year will be a little bit more than we have now, and that's actually good.
Yep.
Because it'll give us, it won't be a lot, but it'll be just a little bit more money in our streets funds to pay for maintenance of the roads, so that's actually really good. Any grants that we would get, if it specifies it needs to be separated from the general revenue of the community, would have its own fund. So, community development block grant, the village used to have, those were separated. Those come with tons of rules, and Chris knows all about those, because she was in charge of that when she was here. And there's just, there's no way that you would wanna even try to intermingle it with
Oh, no.
something else,
No,
because that's a, just strategically
well,
and-
there's so much reporting back to whoever gave you the grant.
yeah,
You
just
gotta
like
keep it separate.
logistically, it's not a good idea, and for legal purposes, it's not. So that's why we separate it out. Downtown Development Authority has its own source of revenue, so they have their own fund. And the LDFA, which we've talked about a lot in the last year, has its own source of revenue as well, so that's a special revenue fund. That particular special revenue fund is going away. So anything that's left over at the end of this year will go back to the general fund, and
I think it's a good thing to point out to the new people that the DDA and LDFA, their source of special revenue is us.
yeah,
They actually are capturing taxes
yes.
from us
And from the school.
and from everybody.
The schools are exempt from
Mhm.
TIF capture, but they do capture, the law enforcement, the Saginaw County 911 Authority taxes, township taxes, the
No
village
debt.
operating,
No hospital debt, no, none
no
of
debt
that
service,
stuff.
but we do capture taxes from like Delta College and things like
And-
that.
At our 12.80, and it's not 12.80 tonight, we're actually probably one of their biggest contributors outside of,
Us and the county are the
Yeah.
biggest. Yep, and once the LDFA is done, actually, we'll actually get some revenue back to the general fund from the LDFA's TIF capture. And I don't remember what I calculated it to be. I sent you guys a memo on that. I think it was $13,000 a
Mhm.
year or something.
that sounds about right.
So it's not a huge amount, but it's definitely something that we can take and use for something else that we choose to use for. So those are special revenue funds, and that's basically legally restricted money from a special revenue source. Enterprise funds, these are business type activities. So, water, sewer, if we were to have our own electricity system, these revenue sources run off of what you call commodity sales. So we sell thousands of gallons of water, and these particular funds have to run like a business, so they have to, the revenue has to meet expenditures, or we have to shift the charges. They're legally required to cover their own expenses. So that's why every now and then you'll see a water or sewer rate raise, or in places like Lansing that have their electrical system, they have to do an analysis every year of, can we afford to continue providing the service at the same rate? And our asset management plans that we're doing right now for water and sewer are gonna tell us, are we charging adequate rates for what we're doing, and what are our future needs? And all that stuff goes into the enterprise funds. And you can think of it just like, Google runs their business, or the local a Bear Sports Shop, they have to run their business and their income has to meet or exceed their expenditures. And so basically we run two multi-million-dollar corporations through water and sewer. The
And
internal,
that's the worst part of this job, is deciding that you have to increase the water rate,
it is.
but you have to.
Internal service funds, these are accounts that service the village. So we use these to pay into so that they can pay for things that we need. For instance, our equipment fund. We put money into this fund so that it has enough money to purchase trucks or large purchases, like last year we purchased flood pumps for the flooding for the river system. If we were to have IT, if we had a big IT department, it would have its own fund, and they would pay for, everything that they do with computers and stuff like that. We have a little bit of IT money, but we keep it in the general fund because it's simple, because all we pay for is the equipment. But if it was a large service, we would pay for that in a separate fund. If we had a motor pool, the city of Saginaw has a motor pool. The motor pool purchases all the vehicles, and then the rest of the departments rent them from them. And so that's an internal service. Fiduciary fund, which we have one now, is money that you put in that you can never touch again. So cemeteries have trust funds where you put money in, and they're legally restricted for like a certain percentage of the interest you get on that money can be used for maintenance or something. What we have in the village now after last year is a retiree healthcare funding system. In that fund, we actually are working with MERS, which is our retiree pension company. They have provided us with what's called a retiree health funding vehicle, which is a trust fund that when we make deposits into that account, we can never touch it again. It is for that specific purpose, and it will go towards funding retiree health care in perpetuity. And that's the purpose of the fiduciary fund, is that there's supposed to be money there forever.
You know what OPEB stands for? Okay, cause these abbreviations, I thought, and when I first came here, I'd be like, oh, really? That's other post-employment benefits.
Yes.
So what that means is the pension is one thing, and then their health care, is another, okay, the healthcare, so it's other post-employment benefits. If you don't know what these abbreviations are, please ask, because I think it's very confusing.
Yeah, and stop me at any time if you have a question too. I know I'm giving a presentation, but this is really a conversation. That's why we're sitting down here in kind of a
Right.
circle, so we can have a little bit less formal conversation about things. So please stop me if you have questions. And so those are the fund types. And we have for a small community, we have quite a few funds, and we do a lot of different services for folks. So last year, you can see the different funds that we have, and that was our budget last year. $3.8 million overall, noting that the internal services, their revenue actually comes from the other funds. So it's kind of double counted in the budget.
Now, what do you mean, when you're talking about total budget, you're talking about total expenditures, you're talking about what?
Yep, total expenditures.
Okay.
Well, so when, I'm a stickler for balancing the budget, so every time I present a budget to you, the bottom line will be zero. So revenues will meet expenditures. So when I say the budget's $3.8 million, I mean that revenue and expenditures match.
So so you're not talking income, you're just talking
Budget.
what we spent, okay, all
What
right.
we will spend and what we expect to bring in.
Now, that's this year or last?
This is last year.
Okay.
This is the current year that we're in, 2019. Because we don't have yet the numbers to build the next budget for the next month or so, that's what we'll be building. But just so you have an idea of what each fund kind of looks like, it's not gonna change too much from this.
Except
most
the
likely,
industrial park,
Except for the industrial park.
we won't spend it,
Oh,
it's gone.
That's gone, yes. Yep. So you can see we have a lot of funds. The bottom two, MERS, which is the municipal employee retirement system and OPEB, which Mrs. Coots explained a minute ago. Those are new to last year because we wanted to separate everything out for tracking purposes.
MERS means?
You just-
Sarah?
Yeah, he just said
Okay,
it.
okay.
So,
And that MERS money, that's not really here, you give that to them, right?
we're tracking our expenses to MERS, and what we've done is, in the past, each individual fund has paid a particular percentage of the MERS bill each year. And then in the last couple of years, we've decided to kind of boost our payments towards unfunded liability by throwing money into it, in order to try to reduce our unfunded liability. So what we've done is we've moved the expenses out of the individual funds and placed them into this so you can see it all in one spot. Instead of trying to go through the budget and identify how much the police department is spending on this and how much streets is spending, it's all gonna be laid out in the one fund. Now, the money's still coming from those places, we're just doing a transfer into this so that we just have one spot. So when Jenny's paying the bills, she's not paying bills in 10 different places. She pays it out of this account, and then later we do a transfer to cover it. And it also includes our unfunded liability that we've decided to pay in, so we are doing an additional amount above and beyond what we're supposed to pay each year in order to reduce that overall unfunded piece we're actually in a pretty good spot now. Most communities are not.
Right.
I think it needs to get pointed out to new people too, that when I first came on the council, I was worried, I'd get this thing in the mail, and there was $1 million missing in money, you know what I mean? And I called up Chris, and oh my goodness, I was horrified. But there was a new rule that had come up, that we have to have funding for our retirees. You know, the state is requiring us to fund all this now. And this is all different since you were here last, Dick. And so it has to come from someplace, and Chris is explaining to me, just calm down, But if you have money questions, she's a great resource person, if you can't get
So
the
is
office.
Matt.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
if
was
you
gonna
can't
say,
get
if you
to-
can't get the office, if it's, 8 o'clock at night, and you
Well, this actually lets us see what our MERS costs are, and before, if you wanted to see what it was, you had to go to every fund and find the
Right.
retirement fund and add it in, and I promise you would have missed some, because there's just so many of them all
There's
over the
tons of
place
them.
that, it's just easier to work with this way, and we're funding it, which we're required to do it by the state now, we never were required to do this before. And it was just like, oh, yeah, we'll pay for it when we get to it.
Right. Yeah.
It's not a bad requirement, I just don't think the state was very lenient and understanding in the way they decided to enforce
Well, I
it.
don't blame the state, I blame MERS and their actuarial people,
Yeah.
they just screwed everybody up, but.
Yes. So, when you look at the audit, now that you mentioned the $1 million missing from the budget.
Yeah.
There is accounting standards, and we talked a little bit about this at the council meeting, because there's a new one coming up that adds in the healthcare stuff, so it's gonna be doubly troubling if a lay person looks at the budget, they're gonna see like a $2 million deficit in the government-wide statement, because the pension through the Government Accounting Standards Board, I think it was Statement 68, which went to effect like 3 or 4 years ago, they require you to count your unfunded liability towards your fund balance in the government-wide statement. And most places, that unfunded liability is way more than they will ever get in revenue in 1 year. And so, we're adding that, plus next year, we're adding the retiree health unfunded liability. So, it's good.
That's there if you was confused yet.
It's gonna look bad.
It
gonna
looks
look-
bad,
it's
but
gonna
you know,
look
when you
bad.
find out
Well,
what it is, it's different.
It looks bad, number one, if you can read it, because
Yeah.
sometimes you
Yeah.
just don't understand it.
Confusing.
If you can read it, it looks bad, but I'm gonna tell you, there's one piece of paper, I see this all the time, there's one piece of paper that comes in our packet that's called the cash balances report.
Well,
And that's the one that tells you where our cash is and what we have. And like he said, the general fund, that's what you're allowed to spend pretty much. Well, I was never free with it, but it's there.
Yeah.
And the rest of them are all pretty well stuck where they are, so you can look at it. So it may say 2.75 million, but that's not what we have to spend. Most of it is already spent in different places. But if you look at the general fund, that's the cash that we have on hand to use. The rest of it's all where it needs to be.
Each fund, and that cash balance and fund balance generally, is a day-to-day number. So when we
Mhm.
provide that report to you,
That's that day.
that's the day that we printed that report, that's where it is. Now, the day you look at it, it may be completely different.
Already wrong.
It-
Well, and just look at the bottom numbers in it, because, I guess it's Marguerite that moves it around. So we're constantly moving that money around to places for CDs to get, the maximum interest rate, like at least 0.5% or whatever. They've gone up now
It's
though,
much
but,
better lately, we
Yeah.
just got one that was like over 2.
but that's how we invest it, is in CDs, and so she moves the money around to invest it.
And that's passive revenue for us. So we
Yeah.
put that money in and it's interest, so if you
It
think
becomes
about,
general fund money.
it becomes general fund. Or if we put, say we put DDA money in a CD, it goes to the
Oh,
DDA
goes to
fund,
the
so.
DDA.
We do a, an allocation of based on percentage of them, because, and this is getting way into the weeds, but we have a pooled cash system, which means all the money that is in each fund only has one bank account. So we have to track the percentages and how much goes in and out, but that actually helps us with interest, because, we try to keep only $250,000 in each bank, but interest on $250,000 in each bank is pretty good, so that's how we get some of that interest
250
money.
is the most we're insured for, so we have to,
Yeah, we
I don't know
have,
how many banks she
I
uses.
think it's like 14.
Yeah, there's quite a few different ones if you look at
Yeah,
them.
they're.
And still a few
Well,
credit
that's good.
unions, Matt?
Yep, actually, we've been having luck with credit unions. We try to move, we had bad luck with one and we took all our money out and said, thanks, but no thanks, and put it somewhere else, but credit unions typically have higher interest rates, so. So that's the funds. Are there any questions? I know this stuff gets weedy pretty fast, but if there's any questions.
We used to
He's
have a
actually
bank account
done
for
that
each
as much
account.
as he can for us.
Holy
So, the big trend now is focusing on this stuff. And when we met last year, in our February meeting, I had created this, this chart to show what would happen if we did nothing with our MERS pension liability. And you can see the gap. The bright colors are my, calculations, and the dull colors are the experience from the plan. And so basically, I just did an average difference and kind of extended it out, and there was no gaining. It was absolutely gonna get way further out of
Going in the
control.
wrong direction.
Yes. And then I said, well, what if we do nothing and interest rates gets better? Well, still, that's pretty bad. So, Public Act 202 of 2000, I think it was 18, required us to do the plan that we did last year. And this is kind of what it looks like now since we approved the funding policy. We have, we're gonna gain ground, and in fact, we have already in the last couple of years. We're at 62% now, which is above the threshold where the state comes down on us, and that was really based on council making those tough decisions to start putting money into the system, and
Because I think the last thing we want is, we don't want the state coming in here, you know what I mean? We want to stay out of that.
And so we kind of talked about this, but I just laid out basically how we structured the new funds. And, so I'll skip that. Although I will mention that council's policy is to put $80,000 additional dollars every year into the MERS pension fund. And so.
Now that's on top of what we already owe them.
Yes, so there's ARC, and this is another acronym that you should be aware of. The ARC is their annual required contribution, and they send that to us in a bill every year, and we have to pay that. there's no ifs, ands, or buts, we have to pay it, or, we get off balance because that actually pays pretty much for retirees' checks coming in and out. So, we have to pay it, and in addition to that, we've decided to start putting $80,000 into a separate account so that it'll add up. Instead of it going in and coming out, which is what the ARC does, the 80,000 will go in and stay, and then the next year 80,000 will go in and stay, and that will reduce the liability over time. It'll meet those lines will start getting closer and closer.
That's a really good move.
Mhm.
So these are just the amounts last year that came from each fund. And basically it's where the employees are allocated and where the retirees are allocated as well. Most of
Some
it,
of your retirement comes from the sewer.
Did I notice what?
Some of your retirement money comes from the sewer.
No, that's not me, I'm not from the general fund.
No.
and most of the general fund is actually the police.
Okay.
That would be, DPW.
Okay.
And then we did a very similar thing with the OPEB or retiree healthcare. And council's policy for that is, historically, we've paid as you go. That's pretty typical among communities everywhere. So what you do is you get the statement for healthcare premiums and you pay them, but you're not pre-funding it, which the state wants you to do. So we were actually at 0% funded up until this year when we made a $90,000 contribution because 3 years ago, council had started setting aside $30,000 each year, and then once we got to an adequate amount, we were gonna make a pretty large investment. And last year, we accomplished that with the MERS Health Funding Vehicle. And we put $90,000 into that fund, and that will stay there. And it's going to accrue interest. They pool it with everyone else's money, and then they invest it, and you get interest back on that. And that is a legally secured trust fund, so we can't touch it. And each year we'll budget to put $30,000 more in there, so it'll start chipping away at from 0% to wherever we need to be. So I think 40% is the state's requirement, but since we pay the premiums each year, they're gonna leave us alone.
So we'll continue to pay the full premium and put the $30,000
On
aside.
top, yes,
Okay.
yep. And so this is where our OPEB come from, the retiree healthcare payments
Another one.
come from.
I didn't get any of that.
And so this is kind of a historical cost breakdown of our payments towards unfunded liability for healthcare. And in 2017, it shot up because council had that policy of setting aside $30,000 a year. And so if we would have done nothing with our OPEB trust and just put $30,000 in the general fund and just kept it separate, this is what it would look like. Of course, it would go up by $30,000 a year in perpetuity. And it looks good, but in the trust fund at a low interest rate, it looks better. And with a grain of salt, with the actuarial assumptions of 7.75%, it looks a lot better. So it's much better to stick it in that trust fund and let that money work for itself than it would be to just stash it in the mattress and hope that, it added up to what we needed. So pretty soon, 2030 isn't that far away in the grand scheme of liability. We'll be over, halfway funded, close to halfway funded, so good job on making those decisions.
They're trying to make us fund forever.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's the point of the unfunded piece, so just, I
They're
guess.
saying if we disappear, they want money left to pay that money.
Yes.
Well, what was happening is people, the retirement, all of a sudden people had no retirement, you know what I mean? The economy changed drastically and that was not Right, I mean, I get upset over that.
So our liability should change based on policies that council has passed over the years. And I think last year we talked about with the new employees after 2009, they're capped at $500, I think, a month for healthcare costs. And we talked about maybe turning that $500 towards the healthcare we make them get to a health savings plan, which would definitely cap our liability, because then the healthcare savings plan would be their retiree healthcare. So,
If it's still there.
if it's, so that's something to think about too, is if we wanna, since we're already capping what we're giving them, why not give them in a health savings plan where they can use that money for whatever they want?
The retirees? Not here, not the employees.
New retirees.
New retirees, not new
Right.
hires.
There are no people who are in that plan yet, nobody's,
Okay.
so it's like Marguerite and me and anyone we've hired after 2009.
Okay,
That's way down the road
okay.
to do that, so it's actually a good time to figure out what we do wanna do, so that when they do retire, they'll be ready for it. I wouldn't necessarily suggest doing that for current retirees, cause that would probably capsize the boat,
Yep.
but it's definitely something to think about for future use. And so, here were the goals that we set last year. Bless you.
Thank you.
We did, so the number one goal for council was to address pension and OPEB liability action plan, which we did. Dangerous trees was the second goal, and restorative maintenance / capital improvements in the parks. And then we talked specifically about doing small things that made a big impact. And then we had a street sign replacement program that we wanted to try to tackle. And so, how did we do? Well, for the first one, we did really well.
Mm-hmm.
Council approved pension and healthcare and retiree health benefit funding policy and action plan. And I know it's a long name, I'm sorry I named it, it was going to the state, so I wanted to be very specific. In April, this was in conjunction with Public Act 202 requirements, which forced us to create this plan. Our funding status for our pension was triggered by the state based on what we had been paying into the system for unfunded liabilities. We submitted our plan to the state with a waiver request because we had this plan in place to tell them, hey, this is what we're doing. We understand that we have been triggered, but if we follow this plan, we're gonna be out of your hair. We were the first community in Saginaw County to have ours approved,
Mhm.
which is pretty
Mhm.
nice. We added a one-time $137,400 last year based on savings we had in the budget to try to, it was like a stopgap. We're like, okay, let's put in a bunch of money now and then reduce that annual contribution to get to where we need to be. And we did that, and it worked. When our audit came back, we were at 62% funded, and hallelujah,
Yeah.
because the state is now gonna be off our back. We started the retiree health funding vehicle with MERS. We made a $90,000 deposit, and the policy is $30,000 a year after that, and that's gonna add up really fast, especially because we're paying 100% of the premiums. The unfunded piece in actuality each year doesn't exist because we're just paying for healthcare. I mean, they're getting their benefits and there's no additional cost above that. So that money is going directly towards basically the calculation of unfunded liability. In the previous year, I think this is where this goal came from. We had a lot of complaints about dangerous trees, and we spent lots of money taking trees down out of the right of way, and so council made it a goal to address that. Well, of course, we took a bunch of them down, so now there's not as many complaints, but we did put in, I think, $10,000 in the budget to address that, and we've only had a couple issues with trees this year so far, but spring's gonna come before the budget ends, and the wind will blow, and we'll probably find one or two. So if that's something council wants to do, on an annual basis, we can just build it in to kind of address. The park number 3, we undertook the first of possibly 3 phases of the waterfowl park, which included structural enhancements to the gazebo, backfilling the duck ponds, new planters, water fountain, tables, chairs, decorative lighting. And our guys did all the work, so it was pretty inexpensive. In Coal Miners Park, this is where we did a lot of small things. We painted the ship both inside and out, and on the inside we put chalkboard paint. So if people wanted to do their graffiti, they can do it in chalk, and then the next person can erase it. And we haven't had any graffiti complaints in the ship since we did that, so hopefully it worked. We painted the bathrooms inside. We upgraded the ventilation system in the bathrooms because we were getting complaints of the smell. So we went up on the roof and we put, those little spinny ventilation pods, and it seems to have been a lot better lately. We added the pickleball court, which was, we did the dimensions for the National Pickleball Association, so it's a legit court. We didn't put down it was kind of a test case, so we didn't put down the surface. We just painted the lines inside of the skating rink, and people use it. That came from a request from the community. So it was pretty good response.
Came from the people that went to Florida.
Yeah.
That's where they play it.
Yeah. So, and it was cheap. We bought some paint. We have a line painter. We painted the lines. We bought, I think it was a couple $100 for the net and the metal posts. And we've got pickleball now, so. Oh, and then we identified and started removing dangerous trees that are in the disc golf course along the trail. There's quite a few dead trees, and I went out with orange spray paint and just kind of went through, and as the guys had time, they would go through with the backhoe and knock them over. So we started doing that. The street sign thing, we weren't able to get to. I think that's a bigger project than we imagined. We gotta go out, count the trees. I was looking up prices for the style that we kind of talked about, which is like the old-fashioned wrought iron, like historical community ones. They're very expensive. So we had money in the DDA to kind of start that project because I won't say most, but a lot of the street signs could be jammed into the DDA's budget. So they'll probably be the ones to start that out. And if council wants to make that a priority this year, we can, now that we have Don here and we have everything all staffed up, we can probably get that project going.
Now, these are just the street naming signs we're talking about.
These are just the street naming signs.
The ones that turn.
The ones that, the ones with the street names, yes. Yes, the wooden, what are they, four
They're
by
treated
sixes?
lumber, I think, but they, yeah,
Warp and twist.
yeah.
Warp and twist, and people like to steal the nameplates out of them frequently. But I added in here that we had talked about quite a few times about the entry signs in the community, and I've been talking with Dan Hellman about it, and he says that we can replace or update them for, I think, $625 a piece. He kind of mentioned that he thinks we could do it in a phase, a couple this year, a couple next year, and get them all done. So I'll try to build that into the budget so you guys have
Is he talking about building a new sign?
In some cases, he has to.
Because he has a different board now that he uses that.
Yeah. He says in some cases they'll need to be completely rehabbed. In other cases, they don't.
They can just be painted.
They can just be painted. But he said in the cases where they just can be painted, he said it would cost more to obtain the new type of backing that he uses. So he just quoted us to repaint them and make them look good. Yeah. So I'll build that in, and you guys can take a look at it and see what it costs and all that stuff, if you want. In the sports champ sign, Don and I have been meeting with the school, and I don't remember what Dan said that cost would be, but there was a pretty cool design that he made. It's like the sign And then underneath the sign, it, for each year would be an individual board, so that we can move them and add and replace.
That would be good.
So, and that's something you'll see too, and
Did you ever find out what the state did with our sign?
the state took them down, I think they gave a couple of them back to us. I think, Pat may have taken one of them, put it in his basement or something. The other ones, I'm not sure what happened to them, honestly.
Pat was on that team.
Mm-hmm.
On the 99 football team,
Mhm.
yeah, so that was,
I'm really unhappy that the state would just take down the sign and not notify us and, you know, that, hey, it's our sign, you know, I mean, I really am unhappy about that.
Well, really, it was the association that bought, well, our sign too, but, yeah.
well, and the cost share too, we talked about, everybody's pretty amenable to putting something into it. I think the school said that they would even buy one of their own and put it in front of the school and then pitch in for some of the other ones, so it was a good conversation with them, so.
Okay, well, they've done a lot. I was in the gym last night and noticed all the new boards they put up on one end, and it's all different sports, and then when they took first in those sports, have you seen those yet? Well, they're down by where they have like the volleyball player and the football player, and then above them are signs for different sports.
Have
So
they
they're
done anything
really-
with their bleachers yet
Oh, bleachers are all new.
in the gym?
In the
They
gym we
should be.
use, yeah.
Or no, I'm saying how uncomfortable they are, that's.
Oh, no,
No.
but easy to get into.
That's a good part.
You
Get
just
down
can't
on-
move
yeah.
it,
Are they
right.
easy to get out of?
No, you're
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, because it's just like half steps going all the way to the top with the railing.
But it's, you sit there and by the, you know,
They're the most uncomfortable
most
things in the
uncomfortable
world.
Yes.
seats I've ever
Everybody
sat.
brings a chair.
They have those little folding.
Everybody brings
seats.
them. They're just heavy to haul in there, but yeah.
Yeah.
They have a back on them, or you go right to the top and get back, so.
Yeah, if you can. And they're kinda narrow for my factor.
They're a little narrow.
Yeah.
It looks like it's a grade school gym, that's what it looks like, it's for grade school children.
You don't
It's
go
not
there.
at all.
Don't fit.
So I just added a couple pictures
wide.
of the
There's not
the
enough
accomplishments
knee
for the
space.
goals that we did, and this is
Gotta
the
sit sideways.
the front page of the report that we filed with the state that they accepted and approved. And each year we have to send them a little sheet, and the law requires me to send it to you electronically, so that was the thing with it was like a spreadsheet that had all of our information, and it said whether we were, it's really small and I can't change it, whether or not we were flagged. So I sent that to you via email, cause that's what the law says, but then I also gave it to you in paper.
Because if you were old, you had to get a magnifying glass and.
Yeah.
I know.
So this is the front page of the report, and this is probably the biggest, most important accomplishment that we did last year, because it puts us in a really good financial spot. Now, we will have to monitor this very closely, because with the evaluation, the actuarial valuation assumptions that MERS makes, as we know, they could be wrong, and if they are very wrong, this, down the road, we may be put back in the same position, but at the moment, we're in a good spot.
But to keep an eye on it, we should know.
It also depends on how many retirees. We
Right.
add new ones in.
This is Waterfall Park at night, in case nobody's seen it.
Looks very nice.
I like it over there,
Mhm.
I've been over there. This pergola that they're building, covered walkway is just mine. Where are they going to put that?
Between the old pump house and pretty much where I'm standing here when I took the picture.
Okay.
And I don't remember if I don't think I put one in here. Yeah, I didn't put the,
Okay.
picture, but. And then this is the ship. This is the ship that we did. It's a little bit darker than it used to be, which makes the graffiti a little harder to see, which is positive. And then the inside we did with chalkboard. And we just left a little basket with a note on it.
That surprised me that worked. It
What
really
if
did
what if
surprise me.
somebody puts a marker on there, how bad does it get?
It's black. So
So
you
it just, okay,
can't
alright.
really see it, and then we would have to paint over it anyway eventually, so. Chalkboard paint is a little bit expensive, but you buy them in little things and it fits pretty
It
big
worked,
area.
yeah, it just worked so well.
And
It
it
did
works,
surprise me.
and the surprise is, this idea came from an 8-year-old girl at the farmer's market. She came up to me and said, hey, you know, there's bad words in the ship. I said, I know, I'm sorry. She's like, why don't you just paint the inside with chalkboard paint so that when they want to write bad words, they can just do it in chalk and we can erase it. I was like, that's genius. That's genius.
Well, you need to listen to everybody, that's the whole
Yeah.
point, you know.
Is that
You can
the,
paint that on, glass too, like if you have old, picture frames and mirrors and stuff like that, and you can make it into like chalkboards and stuff like that.
So we tried it. It was relatively inexpensive. I think less than $150, and it seemed to have worked. Now the chalk is gone. We'll have to replace that each year.
Yeah, but that's not a big expense, you know?
I'm surprised you're not
$8, something
replacing
like
it
that.
weekly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we probably should be paying more attention, but the chalk disappeared. And of course, you know, little kids are running around with it. It gets in the sand and it breaks in half. So now the only thing left is like this little piece that you can. And they did it migrated outside too, but it washes off in the rain. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Okay,
so, so this is my conception of what the budget process looks like. And we're in the first one here, goal setting. So we sit down together and we start talking about the things we want to accomplish. And that's what we're doing today. And then what happens after we leave here is Jenny and I will go back and we will feverishly work on the numbers. And that's the preparation stage, and that's a stage that, thank goodness, you don't have to be too involved with, because we pull our hair off. And, you know, good luck to you, Jenny.
yeah,
I'm already losing my hair, so.
So we'll sit down
but
and
you've
we'll,
never done this before. No, you came after the last, okay.
Oh,
so
poor Judy.
based on the goals that you guys set today, I'll sit down with the departments and say, okay, here are the goals. We'll figure out a way to make them happen. So we'll sit down with Don and the chief, and we'll sit down with Marguerite and Jenny, and we'll get the numbers together, and we'll put the money where it needs to be in order to try to accomplish those goals the best we can.
CAO,
CAO is Chief Administrative Officer. It's defined in the Uniform Budgeting and Accounting Act. It basically assigns me to be the one who gets in trouble for any problems with the budget.
well, that makes me more comfortable.
Oh, I knew it.
Yep, so
For quite a
as,
few years.
so as the Chief Administrative Officer, if anything goes wrong throughout the year in the budget,
It's your fault.
they start,
He's,
they come
well,
to
he's
me.
the one that has to run around and go, this does not match. It's just, gets weird, find some money. It's
Yes.
just-
And then so those two processes together make the proposed budget, which I'll bring to you in February. And then I found this little thing that kind of accurately, it's like they say how sausage is made. This is the sausage maker. And what we put into it is council goals, our operational needs, and our financial constraints. And what comes out is the budget. And some of those things are compromised when there's not enough money. Sometimes we can't do all the goals that we set out. Sometimes the operational needs don't meet our financial constraints. So we have to put all that stuff in the hopper, and what we get out is the proposed budget.
That's pretty much what it's like though, don't you think?
I'm just seeing it totally different, but yes.
She sees everything totally.
Here we go.
For 30 years.
So that's my presentation. We went over some stuff last year that was pretty down in the weeds, so I cut it
That's
out.
exactly what I was thinking too.
I know. But are there any questions on what I just? That was the primer.
So that was A
Yeah. Well, it was
A and
it was
B.
A, B.
and C,
Yeah, pretty much. Well, C is what we're gonna go to next, and that's
okay.
just talking about what we want to accomplish.
Now, I'm assuming because Don is here that he wants something for DPW, is that correct?
I'm not sure. I think he's just here to.
Just,
Listen.
okay,
Make
okay.
sure you don't take too much away from
Well,
When
that's
he
fine.
faints, our goal is wrong.
me. Yeah, yeah.
Self-defense.
Guess when we start next phase, I gotta
Anybody want me to make some more coffee?
use the restroom.
More coffee, Dick?
Want
Dick
some
is out
coffee?
of coffee.
What?
Dick is out of coffee. Matt?
Do you want me to make some more for you?
Oh, we didn't, man, sorry, Dad.
If you need me to, just let me know.
Oh, if you drink too much of that stuff, you end up having to make that run.
Well,
Well, if you take the pills in the morning.
You're gonna have to take it anyway, so.
Well,
So is this where we talk about things we would like in the budget?
No, this is overall goals, so we're gonna talk about, this is what we want to accomplish overall, and then at the next meeting, we'll talk about how we get there.
I wanna make a comment that I didn't make. On your contract, you say that there's an attachment on there, you know, the attachment, you know, the salary attachment. Make sure that you attach that.
It's on the signed ones, and if you want, before we leave, I can make copies of it.
No, I just make sure it gets attached. We will get copies of that again, right? Or not?
Well, that's what I'm saying, if you want a copy of it, I can make it.
Okay,
and
yeah, that would be
Give it to you
cool.
today, and it does have the attachment on the back already.
And Quinn, do we have any space heaters in the office? Does the office own any space
We
heaters?
do, we have a couple, yeah.
In case we have to use the
If we
ice
have to
box
use
back
that
there.
room again,
Yeah.
I spent all day Thursday in such pain, I couldn't even drive the car. When you have arthritis, you
Cold
don't
is
do
not good.
cold.
So why is it so cold in that room?
Well, there's no heat vents back there because it was built in a garage. That's the only answer I have.
Alright.
But we can, I mean, sometimes we'll.
Pretty much, you know,
We can-
usually the doors were left open and it just kind of heated
Yeah.
itself, but you can't do that when you've got other people.
Yeah, I was just, cause we had that door open and it didn't warm up at all. Yeah.
Yeah, if
I
we
just
open-
say,
We open both doors and crank the heat in here and in there, it'll eventually circulate, but.
So what are the vents up top in that room?
Well, cool your returns,
That's all they are? All three of them are returns?
as far as I know. Yep.
It made me not feel so bad when you said you were cold.
Oh, I was, yeah.
I was cold too.
My hands were froze.
Oh.
They didn't warm up till like yesterday.
And I don't get cold very easy and I was, yeah,
Oh, I was
It-
to the bone cold.
yeah.
Yeah, and when
I
did
mean, I
it
was
cold?
under all these
I was
covers
out
at
here
home
just,
trying
I
to-
couldn't
I was
stop
kinda
shaking, yeah.
I was kinda wondering if you didn't have that planned.
Oh, man.
I didn't, no, I didn't realize it was
Hurry it
that cold.
along,
I've
huh?
never experienced it that cold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have
and we could
arthritis
hold
in
that
your
meeting
bones.
next year in Florida.
Yeah.
You are just not.
Well,
I've been out in the
according
rain.
to our credit cards, we did.
First
Oh.
couple days.
Somebody stole our
On
I
top of
identity.
that,
I just,
No.
and I couldn't
Really?
warm up and then I went in there and, yeah, that did me in.
Somebody stole my village credit card number and went to Dave and Buster's in, where was it?
Florida, Jacksonville, Florida.
Jacksonville, Florida.
And then
So we have to dispute, identity theft charges on, the village credit card. We found out yesterday.
John's was
Did
too.
you have a good party?
I hope so. They spent $163.
Jeez.
100, it was 162 on the 8th, and then they tried
Yeah.
other times, and then they tried $6 online at AMC or whatever.
I have a
Wow.
letter in the mail, and apparently there are only two of us, because Ken didn't get it, that my, Blue Cross Blue Shield information had been
A
corrupted.
friend of mine got that too.
And
got
they,
that.
and I followed it through, cause I don't believe everything that comes, around. And we had our benefits rep track that whole thing, nobody had been aware of it. Well, it turns out that something had actually happened, but the company took our information and sent it to one of those those protective services thing. Oh, there's going to be an issue, because my letter is now at the International UAW for review of procedures and stuff, so that that does not happen again. But apparently there was no breach, but there's so much of that around now, that I think it's scary. I do.
Was that
I got it.
agency called Wolverine?
Yes, it was.
I got the
Did
same
you get
one.
it?
Yeah,
Didn't they close down your credit card immediately when you
When,
called them?
when I went
Well,
home
the only
other
reason we
night,
found
It
out
will.
was
on
because
my
we were
phone,
trying to
and it
update our
had
sewer
come
lagoon
in
permit
on my
online.
phone
And
recorder,
they
it
ask
said,
you for your credit card so
that
you can pay it right away, cause
the
they won't process the
That one is both.
yeah,
paperwork
oh,
until
yeah,
you
yeah,
pay 'em.
yeah, I didn't pay no attention.
But
they
They
got
declined our
bored
credit
off
card
of my
like
back.
3 times in a row, and we were
Yeah,
like,
I-
something
and I
right,
called on
our
that
credit
one.
card has
Yeah.
a huge limit, and we're not even
Mhm.
close to it. So Jenny called them, and they're like, oh yeah, we flagged that for fraud.
That's what they did with mine.
They did it with mine too, and then you had to wait 10 days.
I
for your
purchased
credit card.
gas and within 10 minutes, there was another purchase down in Detroit somewhere. And they called me and they said, And I hung up on him. I was like, yeah, this is a scam, so I hung up on the bank. And then they called back and she was like, no, no,
I
no.
did that once
Yeah.
too.
No, no,
That's what
no.
I said. I said down
And
at the restaurant
she
one
says,
day,
we flagged it
my
and canceled
phone-
it.
all my credit cards.
got two-
I'm glad they
two or three charges, yeah.
On my phone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All of a sudden it's bing bing there and I'm looking at
They
that
always
and
call me
here's a
first.
charge in,
That's,
Um,
I worked at the
California
for
at a
years,
Walmart.
It was, you know,
Yeah.
there was.
while I'm
one
sitting
Wow.
here
someone
in St.
called,
Charles
Did you do this
on my
transaction?
card,
And
so.
we didn't even get like a courtesy call. So
And they
we're
said,
like,
take it to the
"What's
local
going
police.
on?"
No, what good's that gonna do?
So
What's he
we
gonna
tried
do?
to use it to do that, and it was declined, and I'm like, I tried it again, it's declined.
Yeah, it was nice
So
though,
then I
'cause-
called and they're like, here you go.
She asked
Yeah.
me, she says, which one are you? And I says, well, I just purchased the gas, and I think it was in Saginaw. And she says, all right, she says, we've already contacted the police and the institution and see if anything there. So they were doing all the follow-up and everything down in Detroit, and apparently it was good because there was like 8 other fraudulent charges within like 20 minutes at that
Okay.
one location,
Wow.
so they could track them. Yeah, so it was pretty cool what they did, yeah.
Yeah,
Our-
well,
Good
when
thing-
you get the bill and there's
I
one
didn't
on
like
there
waiting
that's
2
not
weeks to get a new
yours.
credit card,
Yeah.
but
Well, we,
But by that time, you know, it's a good thing, they got, if you got a smartphone, you
yeah,
can get that card wallet, and so I was just telling Matt,
yeah.
as soon as they make your, in fact, if you be standing in the Frank's there, it'll make a charge, and it goes bing bing, and it
Yeah.
shows up on your phone, no
Yep.
matter where they're made.
Yeah.
And that's how I spotted that one in California, although I'm here, sitting here in St. Charles, nobody else knows that.
so the plan is Monday, we're gonna have John do a police report, just for CYA purposes. And then, the Dave and Buster's thing, I think they were in the store, I think I'm gonna have John call and see if they have, at the time, because
Video.
one of them was,
Video.
one of them was denied and it had a timestamp.
Yep.
So-
And that's what they said to me, they were trying to, they were gonna, because there was mine and so many others, they were gonna ask for the video and do all that they do. They have a department that, most of the place, they used to
They
just say,
never
nah, it's not
argue.
worth the time, but,
When you
they were
call
gonna
them and
look
tell
into
them,
it.
that's not mine, they go, okay.
Yeah.
But we're shutting down your card.
Right.
Yeah.
Right now.
Did you do that,
Yeah.
did you shut down the card so you
Yeah.
can get
They
another
do
one?
it. Yeah.
They're sending us a new one, they're sending us a new one for John too, cause he had a fraudulent charge on his too, in Texas or something,
Two or
some
three of them
sporting
are
goods
on.
store. So,
I keep wondering how, you know, these people are really good, I couldn't do that.
Oh, absolutely.
We have a department,
No, because the
that's what they
gas
do. We have one
they
that's,
have the
it's in Lansing.
different cards for
Yeah,
gas.
It's a subsidiary of us,
Mine,
and that's
'cause
all they
I don't
do
use
is
it very
forensics.
often. That's really-
IT
What was
forensics.
the last thing we used it for?
And they need
did
it, they
something-
hire those kids right out of college, and they're really
Well,
sharp,
they
and
had
they
to
pay
do-
them
These are
a
kids.
lot of
And
money.
then the
Yeah,
only
yeah.
thing that we bought Christmas,
The
the
big
bikes
banks, I
at
know that,
Christmas,
their
for
fellow
Christmas
working in the
thing
big
on my
bank was
card.
telling me
That's
that
a
those
Walmart.
That's at
They
Walmart.
hire these
and
kids
then
out of college and they just
something
sit
for
around in
one
a
of the
room and
things
play
at Dollar
games and all
General.
kinds of stuff, but
And
then
I was like, one
certain
of those
things
three
happen on their
places,
computer
oh,
while
and it was
their
an
Amazon
Amazon.
are working.
One of those three places has a breach,
Mhm.
has to be.
That's 'cause we got our W-2s and our 1099s off Amazon and stuff. So
Can we
that
move
was-
on to chapter 2?
Let's do it. So this is basically a question mark from me to you guys. Based on what we've gone through this year in the budget, and what do you think we need to be working on for next year? And I, you know, if we can come up with 4 or 5 goals that we can get to, or at least at some point, boil it down to 4 or 5, I think that's a workable number of goals.
Can this be like projects?
It's like projects or.
Cause last year we were working on the industrial park, that was a
Big
nice one.
Mhm.
Is there something that we can put, like, start it this year and over
Well,
a number of
We
years?
started a lot of them, actually, they're just hanging out there.
That's what I
waiting
mean, is,
To be completed,
Yeah.
like the water and the sewer and the,
yeah,
I'm assuming when all these plans come in, then we're gonna formulate a plan as to what water lines we're gonna replace.
And when will those come in?
They're coming in pretty soon. I think John mentioned January 22nd, we're gonna be talking about the SAW grants. And there are some questions he has for us then on our level of service. What level of service do we wanna provide? Because there's different financial numbers with the level of service that the community wants. So,
Explain the SAW grant again.
so the SAW grant is the stormwater and sanitary sewer asset management.
Okay.
And I think it was $600,000 or
Mhm.
more that we got for that. Part of the grant is that we have to put together a capital improvement plan, and we have to start funding it within 3 years after the SAW program is finished. So we have to decide at what level do we want to fund that, so we can't do nothing, but we can decide, do we wanna patch things, or do we wanna completely replace our entire sewer system? Depending on what we need or want.
Well, we have a fairly new sewer system.
Yes.
I mean, I know it's getting older, but it's still fairly new. But
Yeah,
the
in
storm
in
sewer,
terms of age, it's new,
yeah,
I mean,
the storm
relative to
sewer
other
system,
communities.
not so great.
but there's
So
not.
I think, personally, I would go after the storm sewer stuff before I go after sewer stuff, except out in the lagoons, if there's some
There's
stuff that needs to
a
be
few
done
things
out
in the
there.
lagoons that need to be addressed.
Do we know yet what our parking lot cleanup status is? Cause I think that when we look at the budget, we have to think we probably are gonna have to spend big bucks. for
And
that.
so this year we have $100,000 placeholder, and I've been talking to AKT Peerless. They are at a point now where I think we can start bidding the project. I
We have
talked.
approval from the state?
Well, I talked to the state, and it sounds like the previous person who was in charge had a different opinion on what level of involvement the state should have. So, the lady that we worked with in the beginning wanted to review and approve everything we did. Well, I talked to a lady earlier this week, or the end of last week. She said, "Oh, we're new. We think you're ready to go." Okay, sweet. So, now it's just a matter of getting getting bids on the project itself, and AKT Peerless can do that for us because they're familiar with that line of work. I think if we sat down and tried to write a bid spec for this project, we would fail. I know I would fail, and Spicer doesn't have the expertise in environmental engineering to do it, so
So they're gonna give you a figure?
at this point, well, they're gonna give us bid specs, and then they're gonna,
We have some money from somewhere else,
right,
plus we put aside money this year to do it.
we've got we have $50,000, 50% grant from the state, so it's 50% up to $50,000. So in order to get the 50, we have to spend 100. And we have 100,000 in what we plan to do was an interfund loan to pay for that, and then we pay it back to ourselves over a period of time. So we don't have to borrow money or bond or do anything like that to pay for this. So that's the plan of paying for it. Now, we don't know exactly how much it's gonna be. It could be 100, it could be more than 100, it could be less than 100, but, what I thought about when we were talking about this is, I think what should be included at the end of this project is putting back a new parking lot all the way around the village office, because as you can see, it needs to be replaced, but we can't replace it until after the contamination is gone, because we can't allow contractors or employees to dig in contaminated soil. So it's gonna be the most expensive, parking lot project in the history of mankind.
But we know it's gonna have to be done.
But-
Well, and you have to
It's
fix
gonna
this
have
out
to be
here.
done,
Yeah.
yeah.
This has to be fixed.
Yep, and there's drainage problems, the water comes into the building under the seams of the walls, and with this project, removing the contamination and then also kind of re-evaluating the drainage systems and all that stuff all in one will actually probably save us monies in the long run, because if we were to do the contamination and that project and then bid out the parking lot, it would probably be a little bit more. So we're trying to do it strategically.
Which is what we did with the industrial, throwing all that stuff in the driven expansion, saved us a lot of money.
But we have more money over there.
More money.
Yeah.
But how much money do we need to set aside for that, so that's what I'm looking at?
Well, the same 100.
Well, I think we should move forward the $100,000, knowing that it could be more or less.
Right.
But we don't, it's a question mark. But I know that $100,000 is a lot of money, and I think if we make that leap and say, if we have to borrow a little bit more, or we don't have to borrow as much, I think that's a good spot to be in. 'cause
Who are we borrowing from?
where was it?
Was it the Boatworks fund?
It was, yeah. The boatworks. So basically, we borrow the money from the boatworks and then we pay it back from the general fund for, I think it was 5 years. And then it's done.
I'm trying to remember
Does the
how much
Boatworks fund just have $100,000?
I wonder how much
No, I
money
think it
is
has 250.
250.
Okay.
250.
The last time I looked, I think it was 215.
215.
215.
Well, I know anytime it gets close to 2, I
Yes.
lose a gasket, so, yes, okay.
But, if for some reason this project is more than that, we can do an interfund loan from any place. So
Yeah,
if we need to
but
borrow.
hopefully 200 plus
I
the
mean-
50, that's $250,000.
That should
Yeah.
cover it.
Talking with Spicer, both Spicer and AKT Peerless don't think it should be too much more than $100,000. They think that
Of
we.
our
But that-
money.
But that
Of-
doesn't include
right.
the parking lot, that's just the cleanup, right?
Yes, yeah.
I mean, the parking lot is gonna be approximately what?
We actually have quotes from 3 different people, and I think it's gonna end up being like 50 to 70,000
Okay.
for the parking lot.
Are
Now,
you including new
that
sidewalks
was
and
the- well, they're gonna do, actually, they were throwing in, one of
grading?
the
Are they
company,
grading?
they're gonna fix the catch basins, regrade everything, and.
So that the water goes away from the building? What a unique idea.
Yeah, yep. And then part of the project is we were gonna put a waterproof membrane around this edge
Okay.
to seal it. So,
That's gonna look like forever.
yeah. And if, I don't know if you noticed, when we did our closed session, that room no longer has carpet,
Well, because it got wet.
cause it got wet. And we haven't replaced it yet, we will have to obviously replace the carpet or tile it or whatever we wanna
I
do.
think I'd just put down that new plank stuff that,
That rubber plank?
Yep.
Yeah, vinyl plank?
So, so that's the kind of update on that. I think we're getting to a point where we can bid it out and have some numbers, and that's where we need to be. 'Cause
well, I agree that that's a good goal, because this looks really bad out here. And we're the first impression of the
Of the
town.
village, right.
So,
so
can I, while I'm thinking of it, because I'll forget again, the thing about Tony Rolando and his shed,
yes,
okay, that is, and I'm fine with that, there was just a question I had. But now we found another discrepancy between one place and another place. And could we from now on, please, when we put these master plans and stuff together, let's use a professional.
I agree.
Pat Ruz is a great guy, but he's not a planner, he's an environmentalist. So,
My take on that is.
we
that-
need to make
yeah.
sure one matches the other, so that we don't have two different things in two different places.
We did talk at the planning commission about the need to go back through the ordinances and hire a professional. Now, in terms of how much money is that, because those guys do not come cheap.
No, they don't.
It's gonna
But
be expensive.
that particular ordinance, that is there was another guy who pulled a stunt like that, and it was a big problem, because we have never permitted, to my knowledge, an accessory building to go on the lot first.
Once.
Well,
And it's still there with our house.
Yep.
And it's surrounded by a jungle.
It is surrounded by a jungle, so you can't
Where's
even
that?
see it. Right down here.
Yep.
On the
Right on the-
left-hand
it's on the
side, over
river.
by the river.
Okay,
Guy
that-
came-
that-
He did a variance, and he came to the Board of Appeals.
That's the guy I'm talking about.
Okay, and he was told, he could do it, and he was gonna put the garage up first, and then build his house from the, inside the garage. The garage is there, there is no house.
Okay, that's the one that caused such controversy, but that's the only instance and I've been on the planning commission a long time. But that, to me, brings up the fact, this discrepancy with ordinances and the language. That, to me, that does not look like the same thing we sent out. Now, where that happened, I don't know, but I've been hollering ever since we got back the new ordinances and the new zoning book thing that we got back, that this is not, it's not right. We do need at some point, and I don't know at what point we need to do it and what our budget looks like now, we need to hire a professional to come in here, and we need to go through all those ordinances, the zoning ones and the whole ordinance book, and see what we need to change.
Yeah, 'cause it's stuff like this, you know, you never see it until it pops up, and then it pops up and you're like,
Well, nobody would
What do we do?
notice
And
this
it's
if
contrary
it wasn't
to-
for me, because I went
Right.
through the other one.
Right.
So,
and it's contrary to what the community standards are.
And
it
see,
is.
it is, it's not what we wanted to
We don't want
happen.
garages on lots with no houses.
But that's my point, that whole, you'll find that any ordinance that I look at in that ordinance book, I'm not happy with, let's put it that way. And when you get into the zoning section, I'm not happy with our little zoning notebook either, that just is not, that's just not acceptable, okay? That's what we have, so I guess we have to accept it. But we need to do that, it needs to start. And I don't know what sort of priority anybody thinks needs to happen, how much the cost is gonna be, but I think we need to start looking into that.
Like one of the main things we can do, which Gary suggested that we do and we talked about, was decriminalizing a lot of our ordinances that are misdemeanor tickets. Because most things other than police-related ordinances should be civil infractions. I mean, we shouldn't be a criminal for having too much stuff in your yard, you know what I mean? I mean,
Right.
and because when you write a blight, the blight ticket is actually already a civil infraction, but for instance, a zoning violation is a crime
Right.
under our ordinances. Should we be adding things to people's criminal records for small, local, municipal, civil infraction things? And that's a good question to answer.
Well, it
too.
needs to get discussed and thought about, because at the same time, a zoning violation is more serious than a lot of your ordinances, because that makes a big difference on what somebody's gonna put in what area. It changes the character of the area entirely.
Yeah,
So
but blight does the same thing too, though. I mean, you don't wanna move in next to somebody that has 50 garbage bags on their porch, rotting, you know, 4 junk vehicles. You know, so that affects it too. You're not gonna have somebody come in and say, I'll buy that house and fix it up next door.
But I'm talking, zoning gets into like out in Cotchville Township, where they put Deja Vu in, remember that historical mess out there, right in the middle of a residential neighborhood. And the men were very upset because they had families out there, and one guy was on television saying, hey, I'm not a prude, never have been, but I don't wanna raise my children next to this, and because of the way it was done, they had no leg to stand on out there. So, I mean, that is a zoning issue right there.
Mhm.
So if they had something that said they, you know, then if it were a criminal thing, that would keep them out of there. Do you understand what I'm saying? So I don't know on that issue. And I think that we need to discuss it and come up with something that's workable. And I think it's gonna be more difficult than most people think.
So, am I hearing a goal that we revamp and realign our ordinances to be more reflective of the community standards?
Do we need to have
Reevaluate
a
them?
couple extra meetings just for that purpose?
For what?
Well, the
Going over the
planning commission
ordinances.
would do that.
That's what I mean, having,
Seems
but
like we,
they'd have to present it
didn't
to
we
us
just
then.
change that? book
We did
before
just
I
change
got
it, and
up?
now they're all screwed up,
But
so
it came back bad.
it came back bad, and that's from
That's
trying
what
to cut
happened.
costs
That's not what we sent out.
by having someone do it
Okay,
cheap,
'cause that,
and
We talked about all this.
yeah, it
doesn't
seems like,
work.
I
'cause then
think
we got
generally
these
when
books
you
instead
do
of
that,
a
you
little
learn.
one.
Right.
You get what you
Yeah.
pay for.
you do, you get exactly what.
Get
And-
what you pay for.
And so we do need, but I do think we need to look into hiring, we have had in the past professionals,
Well, Spicers have professional zoning people.
They have a planning department.
Yes, they
Yeah.
do, and
We
I
work
think
with them
Cindy
a lot.
Newman, who was, I
They
think
give us
she's
a couple
gone
breaks
now.
here and there,
She was
but-
very good,
For some reason, I wanna say she moved to Chicago.
okay, cause she was very good at it.
The one gal went to Saginaw Township,
Oh,
that
Cindy?
Jill or whatever. her
Oh,
name was.
but yeah, but I do think
Well,
we
and
need to look
Bridget
at what the
is in
cost,
It was
Frankenmuth
a big-
now.
Yeah,
what
the
the
one
cost
went
would
to
be and what the
Saginaw
budget
Township,
constraints
then
would
to
be, because we
Then
need to
Frankenmuth.
change
the
those.
gal that used to do all that.
Yeah, she
See,
was
Lois,
good.
we never permitted an accessory building to be on a lot
Oh,
in the
no,
beginning.
no, no,
No.
no, never
And see,
did,
it's
never
the way,
did.
and the way that thing was worded, and when I looked at it, you know, I thought, well, there's another one, and anytime I get in there to look at it, you know, that ordinance book is so big that I don't know who reads that front to back, right?
Yeah.
You go in there, but you go in there when you have to, you know what I mean, when you're looking up a specific issue, and anytime I'm looking up a specific issue, I'm very unhappy.
Frustrated.
So I'm yeah,
Frustrating.
it's frustration. It's not what we sent out, and I don't know where that happened, but I do, that I think that we can avoid that, to get a professional in here to guide the process, okay?
And I don't know if we should do that now, or if it should be part of the next master plan process, because we talked about the planning commission, I think we talked about it at council
Right.
too, about hiring a facilitator to do that because of the things we ran into while we were looking at it this time.
Right.
So that could be part of it too, because if you change the zoning ordinance, it has to at least reference back at some point to the master plan.
Right.
If you have a flawed master plan and your zoning ordinance doesn't match, then you have a legal problem with teeth in enforcing it.
Well, now but can this person from Spicer coordinate that? That's my question.
Well, they're planning specialists, I mean,
Would they know that, do you think?
They would know
should,
that.
they would know it, yes,
They should.
they
In fact,
absolutely should know
I
it.
think Jeff would, that is his specialty. I don't know if he
Yeah,
would
but
do it
he-
for us, but,
He's the owner of the company.
well,
not
he's
me.
in charge of their planning
Okay.
section.
Okay,
But if we could, we need to look at, I guess, how much is it gonna cost us?
All right,
Where we could plug it in.
it does, and can we fix what's there right now so that people cannot start popping up these accessory buildings everywhere?
Yeah.
I mean, can't that be
Yeah,
fixed?
That
at least? I
language
mean,
can be fixed, and
as
we
we
can change
find
that.
mistakes, we need to fix them, but
But in the meantime, we need to start pursuing how to do,
To get
that
it
one
done.
is fixable, and Campbell pointed that out in your email. We can fix that by just
Doing an amendment.
doing an amendment, and I think once again, don't we have to have a public hearing on that?
Gotta go through all the hoops.
yeah.
But we could do that, even the council or the planning commission, either
I'm-
one can change the
I'm just-
language.
Happy where he's putting that, I don't think it's gonna bother anybody. You know,
You know, and the reason it kinda, I got a little
now he
jolt.
cannot be a business.
The reason I got a jolt yesterday is because so I hosted my coffee hour with the manager at Kimberly Oaks. Well, afterwards, I was like, hey, let me go drive past and check to see, well, he had like thousands of dollars worth of stuff already purchased.
I'm sure he has, it's
And-
been cleared for quite a
Yeah,
while.
and he has no idea that this conversation is even happening, so he's acting in good faith based on the fact that he has a valid permit. So,
And I understand that that's not the issue. The issue of it is that someplace else is gonna wanna put up a garage before they put up a house, and we're gonna say no, and they're gonna say, well, this guy over there did that, right? And I think that we need to dry those up. So I think we need to look at that. I don't know if you wanna run that, are we having a planning commission meeting on Thursday?
we're not, I don't have anything for us to do.
Okay, what about that capital improvements thing then?
There's nothing changed, so what you guys have, there's,
Okay.
yeah, so after this meeting, and after I get with Spicer with some of the
Okay,
prices and stuff, then I'll have a change thing come to you guys, but I didn't wanna meet for no reason.
yeah, I agree with that, but I do think then we can change the language in the ordinance. And that can even be, that can be done either place, you can do it as a planning commission project or as a village council project, we could do that either place. And get that one changed, at least, and change them as we go along,
For a simple language change, I
Right.
almost think council could just do it.
do it,
Mhm.
and have it in the council
There's
meeting.
not a lot of
Well,
back-
it's like, you
background
know,
research
it's a
you need.
mistake, let's fix it.
Mhm.
Could we put it at the same time as the marijuana ordinance and just have one public hearing?
No, we can't now, cause we.
The time constraints will
You
have
probably
it.
already noticed the marijuana one, didn't you? Not yet.
Well, I guess maybe we could, but we hadn't talked about it at council. Council has
Well,
to vote.
you can't do them
decide.
together, they have to be
They
separate.
have to be separate,
So-
and council has to vote,
And
set
we
a
have to
public
vote to
hearing.
change the language, we have to see what exactly the changes are and vote,
Yeah.
and then we have the meeting.
So if you guys talk about it in February, then set the public hearing.
For March, and we can change that.
Yeah.
Or you can, well, we could do that. It'll be a busy March because of the budget and all that stuff.
Oh, we're having very busy meetings anyway,
Yes.
as long as we don't have them in unneeded place.
Okay, so,
So back to the driveway, or the parking lot, I think,
so that
I
should,
think that
that
should,
should be our number one goal.
we should at least look at the
Mhm.
cost of it, see what it's gonna be, see where the money is, and get it done.
That'd be done anyway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
These
Yeah.
people back here are very upset, so,
And then we,
let's
yeah,
get it
it's,
done.
yeah,
so,
and I
that's a
think we need to
priority.
talk to with the.
and I don't blame them one bit.
No, I think we need to talk with the fire department too, because they're gonna have to do theirs at the same time, and it might be something that we can,
They don't think it's theirs.
I know they don't, but it's worth a conversation.
Okay,
What part of their?
they don't think they own anything on this side of their fire department.
Once they're digging into it, they could find more, once
Well,
they're digging in.
Isn't there dumpsters sitting over here, or did they move it?
Well, we have a dumpster, that's our dumpster.
Our dumpster's in the back parking lot.
Okay,
I think the fire department owns like 3 feet from their wall.
I think they do
Where that,
too.
Where it's like a traffic.
that metal thing,
Yeah.
that's where it stops.
Yeah.
Well, if it gets dug up. There.
We'll send you a bill.
Somebody better be notifying the fire department that this is going on.
Oh, I'm sure Sarah will.
Oh, I think the fire
Oh.
department knows it's going on.
My goodness. But that one to me is a priority, get that cleaned up. And
Yes,
if we get that cleaned up and
absolutely.
get the new the new parking lot and everything, that's gotta
I
be a
think
big
they've
priority.
been quite,
Yeah,
patient with
so I
us.
just feel like that's a big lead weight hanging over our heads here.
Number 1 goal, get contamination and parking lot finished.
I really think the number 2 goal should be to improve the looks of the village,
In terms of,
the way it looks. In
well, that's
terms of
non-specific.
the flowers and the
Everything.
weeds all over and the,
We,
um,
yeah, that's it.
cut the trees at the bridges,
Yeah, we were actually trying to wait for the river to freeze and do something about
okay.
I think
Because
you're
it's-
talking about main
it's
thoroughfare
much
then.
stress-
I am,
Okay.
I'm talking
Okay.
about the looks as you drive through town. The first impression looks. And I wouldn't even be opposed, now, you said that the DDA is considering taking the boulevards out and returning the parking back to the way it is. And I wouldn't have a problem, and I put it up, but the kiosk, if we would take the kiosk down and put
Kiosk.
the big square thing that just sits there in
By,
town,
on the
on the
corner
left.
by
In
Frank's.
the middle of
Oh.
the.
In between
Frank's.
Frank's
and
and,
put that clock over there.
Mm-hmm.
Are you're gonna leave that parking the same, right?
Well, according to the plan that Spicer did.
Okay.
How much is that gonna cost to do all that?
They preliminarily, they think it's gonna be $500,000.
And the DDA
I hate spending
has-
money twice on the same project.
But my feel is if you're gonna do it, tear out those crazy sidewalks and put up taller lights.
Well,
It's just,
the sidewalks are, I mean, I don't know.
cause they're cracking and,
Same.
I don't like the boulevard, I don't like the,
but you don't wanna fix it.
monstrosity of a sidewalk that, I mean, why do we need a sidewalk so wide? But we've already paid for it to be in there, and it's still somewhat new. I mean, we don't like the sidewalk, we don't like the boulevard, but I hate paying money again on the same project.
That sidewalk isn't much bigger now than it was back in the old days.
Oh, no, it's
Oh,
the
it's
same
huge.
size. It's the
That's-
same size.
Is it? Like,
Yeah.
that sidewalk is
Change,
huge.
right?
But to that
The
point,
sidewalk didn't change, but it could.
to that point though, if we're constantly having to fix it and pay for chemicals to create abrasion on the top, paying for it twice would be maintaining it in a more expensive manner than
I
it
know.
would be to put it back and have just concrete sidewalks, which is what Spicer was
And,
suggesting.
and I agree
And
with
it
it,
is
because I think
starting
you're in a
to
situation where
decay
that
in
sidewalk
some
is
places.
dangerous at times, and
It
it's-
is.
and
It
somebody's
is. It's
gonna
very
get hurt.
slippery.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's
And
I'm gonna
it's
tell you
not-
right now, the older you get, the harder it is to walk.
It is.
Yes,
I
it
know.
is,
And I will
yeah.
tell you an
You're talking about
anecdote.
us older people.
I am, it's
All of
harder
us.
to walk on it.
It is.
There's only two
There's
that's
been at
under
least
50.
3 instances where
I'm not
I've
under
had to
50.
stop
You're not?
driving through and pick up an old lady
You
off the
did
ground.
that.
Like,
Those bricks,
Literally.
those bricks are bumpy.
Yeah, they are.
They're,
And
they're,
I
they're
saw-
slippery as the
It's not
devil.
just that they're bumpy, they're
Well, I
not
saw a
uneven.
lady
There's
with her
some that are
walker
very
going
high.
like,
Yeah, but they're starting to
Yeah,
do a lot of
Yeah,
things.
yeah.
yeah,
Just
I agree that it's not,
And to keep it,
Not
with
ideal.
it doing that, we would have to do major overhauls of sections, which,
might as well do the whole thing
Right.
and get it done.
right, and then the safety issue of the boulevard is another checkpoint on the side of doing it. Because, I don't know,
It's
This-
hard to turn to the left to look out rather
It's
than
just
turn
my
to the right.
experience that I have to use all of the reflective surfaces on a building
Yeah.
in order to see behind me, cause if I'm
Right.
parked next to a van or a truck, I
Yeah,
can't see.
exactly.
You take a chance. Yeah.
And
The
that's
other
right
thing,
back
the
to
speed
the-
limit at 35 don't
Well,
give you time to
it's-
react.
It's gonna be the same thing
I
if you're
can't
parked
see
this
out the
way.
back of my
It-
car.
it-
Every
It's
time
the
I
same
get out,
problem.
I'll
It
rush
is.
into
It's
the
not
parking
quite as
lot.
bad.
It is, but you're clear behind you.
Mhm.
Can, on
And I-
safety issues,
I always say to myself,
Mr.
that
Acton.
when I pull out of there, that thank God that people look out for old people, because, you know, you pull, if you're next to a van or pickup or something, you know, you can't see even with the backup camera, and I got all those buzzers and whistles and everything. I'm still pulling out in front of people, I mean,
Oh, yeah, it's a chance, when you
Yeah.
back out, you're taking, when you're
I
zipping through
can't
that
see that it's
light,
gonna change a lot.
I mean,
Oh,
our light,
It's even better when the people go
Yeah.
through on the right hand
oh
of the
my
person in the
gosh,
middle.
I've had
Oh,
that happen. so
shooting for
many
that
times.
thing
tricky.
together, and you're going, what
Yeah.
are you doing?
Reaching
Can't you
hurry.
read the thing that says right only?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But
That
it's
needs
not
bigger
logical.
sign up there,
It's
too.
not logical.
It's
That's
not
all.
logical.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and with the plan that I had Spicer drive up, it kind of aligns the two sections of Saginaw Street. So when you go through the light, you're going directly
Street,
to
right.
the next, to the
Right.
same
And
lane.
that's-
Right.
Is, but are we talking about putting that as a goal for this,
I wouldn't, we have to,
to do
we
too
have to
much
try,
work for
we
that,
have to
right?
try to collect money for it first.
Okay.
And
Well, what do they have, the DDA?
the DDA only has a couple $100,000 in their
Okay.
fund balance, and
Okay.
I don't know if, draining that would be prudent, for this project.
No, but it's prudent to do it while we still have a DDA.
It might be prudent, however, to have the DDA pay for the engine, for the design of it. Instead, because what they did is they did a basic little
A little
sketch for
knock-off
free. If this is something that we're actually gonna go after, then maybe what we should do is pay the, whatever, $15,000 to have it designed. Then we'll definitely have something to look at and go after. And Spicer said that they think that they might be able to actually go after some grants for us for that project. So the DDA, we have, it's a major street, so we can kind of pull together money from different places, and then we have the,
It's a local
just,
street,
oh, is it? Okay.
it is,
And then we've got
they
this,
traded.
oh, that's right. And then we've got the, street millage fund that we can, you know, supplement some things with there, so that particular section, it can be a conglomeration of funds, because it's so expensive, $500,000, and that's not even engineering it yet, so we might find it
And that's
more
not the
or less.
sidewalks and lights, is it?
I don't know that, I'll have to ask.
But we can start pursuing it, it's not a budget goal, but maybe just
we can look into it, yeah,
we can look
Yeah.
into it.
it's worth looking into.
If that's what we wanna do, I can, get plans together,
Yep.
if you're willing to spend money on that part.
I'd like to see it change.
Well, are they willing to spend money on that part?
Well, I don't know that, so
Several of them have talked
let's
about
pursue
that, they'd like
Yeah,
to see
let's
it.
pursue
they've
talk to
talked-
them about it,
they've
see
talked
what
about
they
it,
think.
and I haven't
Topic
shown
for
them the
Okay.
plans yet, I haven't been to them yet.
Okay,
I've been shopping it around to whoever will listen to me, but I
Okay.
haven't been to the DDA yet, so.
okay.
Okay, I have an issue on safety, and this is in the park, and this is kind of like off to the side, but we were talking about safety on the sidewalk up there. That the park somehow, with not having a DPW superintendent, we didn't get the grounds raked up the way they should. Pine needles, when they fall on the ground and then get wet and hang around in there and the whole thing. And you notice this when you're old and you have arthritis and you don't wanna fall, because a fall is just unbelievably dangerous. They are so slippery that they do present a danger.
Are you talking on the sidewalk there by the,
In the grass.
The trail.
In the grass itself.
so you're talking between the bathroom and the ball diamond, is that it?
Right, all over back there. I cut across a section of, you know, there are two fields in the back there, and I cut across a section of grass to go to one field, and I was having a hard time maintaining my footing through there. I was a little bit afraid. But I think that is, I think anybody could fall, not just old people, but I mean, it is especially dangerous that this year when you guys go up there, can you make sure that they rake that really well?
I don't know if we'll rake it, we can clean it up, we have equipment.
Well, you know what?
And, you know, I mean,
You
I know Matt, the village council's taking a lot of heat, I mean, I've only been here 6 months, it's kinda, I didn't wanna dive in and do a bunch of stuff, I'm just kinda watching and see if we can improve, and, you know, we have a lot of ideas. And,
But, yeah, but it's whatever it takes just to
Right.
get those pine needles up.
Yeah, Don and I have talked, I don't know, a dozen times about a full court press next year, so that,
on the park is our major.
that number 2, improve aesthetics of the village, that is
So
something
that it would
we
be
have
included in
anticipated.
that then.
Well, I think the parks are one of our main goals to, there's a lot of little things we can do to really improve stuff, and I don't wanna make the guys look bad, the park looks nice overall, and it's kind of a touchy subject with them, if we wanna, why you wanna change stuff, you know, it's that kind of thing, but we are gonna change some stuff and do some maintenance issues different.
Do
Well, we
we,
don't want
do we
them-
definitely need a roof on the gazebo, or pavilions? It is pretty
That
bad.
large one, absolutely, but I mean,
It's
that's a
bad,
money,
but it's
you're
old.
talking a big chunk of change to fix it right.
Yeah.
You thought with a metal roof would be best.
I
But
don't
it-
care what you go with.
Okay.
I think the
needs-
metal roof is the best idea.
It's probably the lower maintenance over the long
I
run.
just think it's the
Oh,
best
But
idea.
no.
I'm sure that thing's been
Less
there 50
maintenance.
50
It'll be
years.
too slippery for the kids to get on top.
Yeah.
But I did
Or
think,
not.
Or not. Or not.
Or sled off, huh?
in defense of your workers, they had no, I mean, workers like that without a leader, do you understand it, without a supervisor, can go all over the place, and everybody can be quite busy.
Yeah, they chose their own path.
But they choose their own, that there's no, so but I will defend them, I don't have an issue with your DPW guys, I just think that we need a plan here for what we're going to do and how it's gonna do.
And me and Matt have been talking a lot.
I'd like to
about
see the
that
park
behind the
improved.
scenes.
But
Yeah, I mean, the park's
the
great, and
people
it gets the most
do
use of anything
complain,
else in
you
this-
get complaints.
Yeah.
And you know,
Yeah,
I'd like to hear them too, I mean, if somebody complains to you, at least let me or Matt know, I mean,
yeah.
it's not fun to go to a council meeting and someone say, this looks like crap, you know, let us know so we
Been there
can
since my
have
kids.
some
I think
more
I've called
community.
in.
I think they see a difference in how it used to be and how it is.
I remember how it used to be too.
I do
Yeah.
like the flags at town hall matching, that's nice.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
got right on that, so
Yes.
that's good.
Yeah, because as soon as you said it, it's the only thing I could see when I drove through town.
Was the,
Was the
Her heart-
was the
Once you said
mismatch.
something, I noticed it, but it's like, you know, I'm noticing
Yeah, I
little things over time, I can't notice everything at once, you know?
The
It'll
one-
start re-clicking.
The one thing that was really bad, and I mean, I'm not one, I don't pick apart things, I really don't. If it looks dreadful, I will notice, if it looks okay, I'm fine. But driving by the park this summer, where it didn't get weeded and the whole thing on the front, even my husband was talking about that they need to either not plant anything there or take care of what it is that they planted there. So I do think that a lot of people did notice the park issue.
Well, I think that's
there
on
was
the right
miscommunication
yeah.
between the village council people and the, from the school, you know, their decoration day thing that they do.
Beautification?
Beautification day, yes. It, you know, I think there was miscommunication there where, you know, we said we'd like it cleaned up better, you know, and maybe they could help do it a little bit. And, I don't know what was said, but boy, they clashed. And I felt real bad about it because there's not a person here that doesn't want to have beautification day and have the people, you know, kept upright, you know, pull the weeds. And those girls were out there last year. Anytime I come
No,
here
I-
in town, they were out
I
there
never
digging,
saw
but
them.
I
didn't-
think it
oh,
was,
God, I
it
did.
was
I didn't
fixed
this
at the
year,
last
I didn't
meeting.
in the past,
In the
maybe, but.
I
past
think
years
they
I've
felt
seen it
better.
because
Right.
they're worried that they.
Those girls
once they
did
get in
work,
the
and that's,
streets,
Yeah.
you know,
Okay.
money to-
them saying,
Especially
people
up
saying
by
they didn't work, they
Virgin
did, we dumped a
but
lot
I've
of
never
weeds.
seen
Oh,
it done.
yeah.
Last
Yeah.
year was.
Well,
You
there
know.
were a lot of weeds.
Oh, I
last year.
understand.
Oh, yeah.
That's the problem.
And-
Yeah, I think Chris and I and Don went to a meeting with Beautification Day last week. Last week?
Yeah, it's Monday,
And I think that was a great meeting.
it was,
I mean,
Something changed between the first meeting and that meeting, in my opinion.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So I don't
Yeah.
know what,
we all want it to look
because
nice.
the first meeting we went to,
I just think.
I don't know if they thought we were
Yeah.
outsiders coming in, or I don't know what went on, but me just stepping
Yeah.
back
Yeah.
and you heard a lot of stuff that the village wanted to cancel beautification day. That wasn't the meeting I was at,
Okay.
you know,
Yes, I
it's
didn't
like,
eat yet.
I don't know where that drama come from, but something happened there, and then the second meeting
Oh,
was,
dodos.
and we talked about doing some chemical stuff at that first meeting, and they were dead set against it.
Well, they weren't at the second
Exactly,
meeting.
so someone, some professional talked to
Somebody's
them,
been looking into
that looked into
something.
it and said, yes, you can use chemicals safe
Yep.
laying by the label to benefit you, so.
Yeah,
something
I
changed.
thought it went really well, so unfortunately, they weren't all there either, it was just
No.
two of them.
But,
And we'll be going to every beautification day meeting.
Good for you guys. Great. on
we-
you.
Well,
we want
I'm not
open community.
volunteering you, I'm
No.
saying Don and I, or.
well, you're welcome to come, because it helps, but,
Good for
you know,
you
it's
too,
like,
Chris.
we're not bad people, we wanna help you, but
Right, right.
don't, I don't know what happened, but something changed there, you know,
Well, I thought it went fine.
yeah.
I think it was a good meeting, and I think we're pushing each other towards a strategy
Mhm.
instead of just going out and doing stuff.
Well, and the last thing I
I know.
wanted to do is help Swan Creek do
I know.
other things, so
We're used to
it's
it.
like, no, I don't, I got a huge.
And Chris, I was happy to hear you say that you didn't wanna see village equipment going
I
outside the
don't.
village.
I don't,
And me
they
and
have
Matt,
pickup trucks, they can pick
and
up
me and
their
Matt
stuff.
talked about this too, I don't wanna be the devil's advocate, but as a taxpayer, I don't like seeing
No, I
my
didn't want
stuff
it out. I
going
had no
to
problem
Brant
saying it.
Township, but I was glad that
It was
hear
like
you
a
say
big
that,
no,
you know.
yeah,
we donate a lot of in-kind services, and I hope they recognize that.
yeah, and we donate them to within the village limits,
Exactly,
so,
Yeah, because we
That's
are
how
the
it should
we are
village,
the
be.
village.
Period.
And when
Some
I-
of us here think that our money could be spent other places, okay, but I'm a big no on that, so,
I mean, when I heard Swan Creek Township donates $200 to send
Yeah,
a whole,
yeah.
whole class up to the Rector Cemetery, it's like, that's a pittance to what that
is that
job.
where I went, what?
That's I was like, you know,
A whole 200.
a whole $200 to have the whole cemetery clean
Yeah, they have their cemetery cleaned by those
for
kids,
$200
Good deal.
donation.
and get
Wow.
2 pots.
And I think Jay that was an eye opener for him
Yeah.
too. It's like, it's not that we don't wanna help you, but come on, cost
have
the
a
benefit.
cemetery fund. We don't do it
Exactly.
in the St.
I mean,
Charles Cemetery, that's not ours either, but we don't do it
Till
up
I
there.
came here, I took care of a cemetery. I'd love to pay $200 to
Yeah.
come out and clean it up everyone. That's a hell of a deal. I appreciate it. You know, that kind of
It
stuff.
cost me almost cost me $100 last year to buy some artificial flowers and put them in a hanging basket on my husband's gravesite.
Yeah, it does.
And that was,
It's
and
a-
they were artificial.
I paid that for my
How
yard.
you can do it,
Yeah, you know,
They're-
that's
they're-
good
You
for
can go to
them. They
Hobby
probably,
Lobby.
man, this is great.
Because you can get them really cheap there.
Yeah,
Buy
we
one,
got
get
enough to
one
take
free.
care of.
Hobby Lobby,
Yep,
Yeah.
nice flowers. Or do what my dad did, take them apart and paint them.
I went to the
Oh,
dollar store.
no.
Oh, yes.
Oh, no.
So let me recap so far where we're at. Number 1, contamination parking lot cleanup. Number 2, improve aesthetics of the village, and I kind of have a side note of working with Beautification Day better on that one.
Can we form a committee on that? When I was talking to Jay and Doug before, like, an actual committee, that's Beautification Day, the village, some people from the school, so everybody can coordinate. This is just gonna keep communication.
Well,
I
I
mean,
think,
that's-
Another committee.
I think with Matt and Don going, I think that's a good,
I mean, do you want a
That is
community
a-
representative to go with us?
That's what I want.
I mean, we could have a council person volunteer to go with us.
I mean, I'd like to do that, but I think that when we were talking, we were talking about possibly getting some students from the school too, you know, student leaders.
But
And
I
seeing
know
if they'll go.
when we were talking about this meeting that Chris and I and Don went to, I was kind of thinking that's the route we would go down, was have
Mhm.
like a committee that meets frequently to talk about this. But they said, we already have a committee, it's the
Well,
beautification.
they
have
have
all
the
of-
they have the beautification, and that's why we have no communication last year.
Well, see, what they have there, and I was really quite impressed with it, they know where all of their plantings are.
Definitely.
They know who's gonna take care of them, and it's just that some people don't take care of them after they offer to. And I think we agreed with them that if somebody's not gonna take care of it, we need to know if it's within the village.
And that's why I
If
was
it's
saying
downtown.
if it's a committee, aside from the beautification day committee, then we have a say, and we can actually say, hey, you know, Don can call and say, hey, you guys, you were supposed to, you know, this
Right,
isn't looking
that's-
too good right now.
I
And you're
think-
outside of their
I think the
committee.
village took a lot of heat for
Yeah.
gardens that were adopted that
Yeah,
we had nothing to do with,
Yeah.
but
Right.
No, but I think you don't need another committee for that. You just need the people that are in place
We
to
sug-
communicate
We
with each
sug-
other.
Well,
we
that's-
suggested a liaison
It's not gonna
committee,
happen.
they weren't receptive to the idea.
I don't think that's
They
gonna
didn't
work.
want an additional meeting on top of the meeting, and then we would have to have that meeting and plus a meeting.
And another
council
meeting, and yeah, and it
But
just gets
that was,
meetings and too many.
that was what they said to us. I proposed the idea of having a liaison committee, they didn't seem too happy about that.
They're a little group that's been together for a long, long time. And I don't think.
And I think when the village showed up at that first meeting, they did not really, they didn't know us and
They
didn't
weren't
care.
expecting.
They didn't care for it one bit.
I've been going to those meetings for a couple of years now, and they, a lot of what gets done outside of their meetings, and then they just come and tell everybody what's happening.
Okay.
That's part of their process. I think the top 3 or 4 people who actually do a lot of the organizing communicate outside of that meeting, unlike
The other people.
because they're not held to the open meeting stuff, so they just plan stuff and go off and do it, and then
Mhm.
tell everybody what's happening. So that's a little different than the way we're used to things happening, where decisions are made at the day of the meeting. Decisions are made generally before their meetings.
No, it
Or on the
might,
fly.
it might
Or
be
on the
nice
fly.
to have a council member there
I think that would be a good,
that,
Enough with
that
the
can
work.
say,
if you're asking
no,
me,
we're not doing that. But we'll do everything else you've asked us to do,
'Cause I don't,
but we're not.
think
But
there
if you're
were-
asking for
When I'm not,
communication
I try to eat.
between groups, the only way you're gonna get, it's easy to say, well, this is what we expect and it should be done. It doesn't matter what should be done. You know?
No, but it's very easy to have someone other than Matt there,
That's what
because they look at him as, oh, but you've gotta report back to that board. And there's nobody from that board here saying, oh, no, that'll never fly. So, Diane,
I'll go.
okay,
She's very diplomatic, yeah.
Thanks for volunteering.
I mean, take
instead of park,
take
you could do
turns.
this.
Well, I'm concerned about everywhere.
You're very concerned about this stuff, so you'd be good. You would. Just
Do-
remember, if
does
it's outside
beautiful-
the village, we're
here's-
not paying for it.
I agree, I
Yeah,
will
see?
go, and I will say that. Because I heard they go to Brant,
They do. Well, they go to Ringwood,
Brent,
they go to.
but they don't do Brant, Township Hall because she does her own, remember? They said that.
they
Well,
said
they
they
said
hauled,
that.
they
We
delivered
hauled.
wood chips out
They
there.
delivered wood
We
chips,
delivered
but
wood
they
chips.
don't do the planting of the flowers out there. They take pots to Nixon's and the bar. And then
I think
The
if they have
Schroeder
less kids
lady
and less
takes care of
time,
the Township Hall.
they need to reduce what they do.
And
They'll
And
have
they
to
are.
figure-
And I think that was the general consensus from the
Well-
very get-go from us.
But they
You
took
know,
that
yeah,
wrong, I
yeah.
believe, when that was.
But
that-
since then, they've knocked some things off.
Something's changed, I don't know
Yeah.
what happened
Something's
in
changed.
between.
I-
Bye bye,
I think the relationship is healing, just from
I think so.
from the one meeting, and
Well, yeah, Diane would do those. I think they're on are they always on a Monday,
no, they're on.
Thursdays?
Thursdays at 7.
Yeah.
But then
Oh, at
this was
night.
during the day though.
This one was
last-
This one was a
Okay.
special meeting.
Oh, was it? Okay, it wasn't the
Okay.
regular.
Yeah, this was because Janie Girding was only available during her prep hour,
Okay.
so we showed up in the middle
Wow,
of
she
the
was
day.
waiting on the
Actually, I
prep
think
hour.
it's at 6. Thursdays at 6. Cause I
Thursdays
used to
at
hit them
6.
before I'd go to the fire board.
I have it on my calendar. I'll look and.
Okay.
Let her know.
And we were trying to see, do you have a plan or, where are all these planners and
Well,
decide?
they flipped through all those pages.
Well, they did and they didn't. I mean, their plan and my plan, I like to, what are we talking about? Who
Yeah.
owns what? They kinda generally laid it out, but no, actually, planner ABC, who takes care of it? Because I think the village took a lot of heat for beds that were supposed to be maintained by
Yes.
others.
Uh-huh. Yeah, they were listing the people
If
that
I'm
were
gonna get
supposed to do
my,
those
me and
beds.
Matt are gonna get our ass chewed, I want it because it was something we were supposed to maintain,
Mhm.
not something Citizen C was.
I agree.
You know,
You want
You
it
know,
to be your
I
fault.
don't
want
mind
it to
getting
be my
blamed for
fault,
something
yeah.
I'm supposed to maintain, but,
I go
Yeah.
along with that.
Yeah. So next year, man, Don's got orders.
Well, and I thought we were gonna do that Monday, but we did never really get to that.
yeah, they didn't really do
Who's
anything.
in charge of what? They said, well, we've got these planners, okay.
They talked about it, but they didn't do
They
anything.
didn't say. I don't know.
So I don't know how you.
Are they
I
gonna
think
come
it-
up with a final list of who does what?
Yes, that's our goal.
That's the
Okay.
goal,
I don't think they generally said that, but I think if we're gonna help them, I'd like to see something more focused on.
Concrete.
Yes. I don't know what you wanna call it, a master plan, a
At least
master
things that they
list.
expect you to do, maybe that would be a.
Well, or things we're willing
willing
to
to,
do,
right.
you know?
Right.
'Cause I-
If it's ours, if it's in the DDA, if it's in the,
I think there's a little overlap and misunderstanding of some stuff too, because, you know, they operate mostly in the public right of way. But they're generally kind of telling us what they want us to do, which
we then told them, it's not really our right of way, that's M52's
most
right
of
of
it
way.
is.
I'm sure it's all MDOT's, right?
It
Where
is
the park
MDOT's,
up to
but
that
we have a right
fence.
to use it, but
Right.
that's not ours to take care of. And it belongs to the homeowner.
Well, I have a
eventually.
neighbor that chewed us all out, and I said, what? I didn't, that was the first I heard of it. Al,
I know.
Yeah,
that village? I said, wait a minute. What are you talking about? So, I know what you're saying, Don.
I mean, I normally don't hear gossip and I don't like it, but I'd heard it through someone that's a really reliable source, and it's like, I didn't realize there was that much effort behind the scenes of people trying to slam the village, and that,
oh,
I
they,
mean, I
they're
wasn't
out
gonna shoot
there.
the messenger, but I don't think we all as a whole should have got the grief we got over that. I mean, I'm not a gossipy person, but if I hear it, it's pretty bad, because I don't go out of my way to hear that kind of stuff.
You,
know?
you run through the grocery store, right?
I don't
He
run
doesn't
through
go
it.
to the, I've never seen him. His
There's-
wife is
there's
always in the
I
occasionally-
show
grocery
up
store.
run into
incognito.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
it's
don't-
Donna, it's only Donna.
But if I
I show
hear it,
up
I'm
in
gonna keep
sweatpants and a
moving,
hood
I'm
and
gonna
go.
tell them that, it's like
That
Jen
doesn't
said, they
save
can
you,
call the
though,
office.
if
on
you
that.
know
Get a
Yeah.
cottage up north.
Sometimes I leave.
Disappear for the whole weekend, that's what
Yeah,
I did.
but I think the moral of the story is that we're kind of refocused and everything is back to pretty close to where it should be, so it's positive.
So that's three things.
That's two, is that, I
Well,
thought
Now, are
it
we
was
four.
two.
Are we
And
gonna,
then, we have, what I have here as number 3 is improve downtown streetscape.
Yeah.
And I'll put plans.
But who mentioned the large gazebo, how long,
I
or
did.
the large pavilion, how long a term plan do
Oh,
we have
right.
or something for that?
We've got quotes for that, and it's, I think, $35,000 on the most expensive end, because there's some of the trusses need to be replaced. And that's if we do metal. So, and
I think
this
metal-
is my opinion, I'll state that, my opinion, I think metal is a good way to go, because it's expensive now, but thinking for the, the manager
Upkeep.
30 years from now, he's not gonna have the same problem, because that metal is still gonna be good.
It'll be a 30-year fix if you do
Mhm.
it right, instead of this 10-year and have the shingles blow off and kids get up there
They break
and
them off.
hammer sticks through the underside of the roof.
Well, that pavilion's 50 years old, or even old,
Structurally
even
sound.
old,
If we do it
yeah.
right,
I
it'll
think
be there
I
another
think I
50
read
years.
the pavilion was put in 1974 or something.
Oh, 74.
So-
We've been working on it, back corner,
So, but anyways, that, we got quotes for that, and it's in the capital improvement plan that we'll see.
and that's,
It doesn't necessarily mean it's gonna be in the budget unless you guys want it to be.
Mhm.
oh, no, I don't
Well, let's
think
get
so. I
prices
don't think
for
so.
that. You got prices, let's look at the prices.
I've got
for it.
prices.
Oh, you
No,
have
it's
quotes.
the-
And what is
That
your-
expense
what is
might
your
be worth
park
it in the long
committee
run.
with that?
Yeah, it's just when can you do it?
I mean, are they behind that as a project?
I think they are.
And it's for, what is for?
Yeah, he said
Pavilions,
he's got
rules.
quotes already for the,
I think they're behind it, but I'll be talking to them more about it next Wednesday.
And aren't they also working on the handicap
I
playground?
don't know,
Yes.
I don't know.
It's called the Coal Miners Park Universal Play Initiative.
You have to come up with a whole bunch more money someplace else, because that is a lot of money.
It's $196,000 for the playground, and we got, I know I sent you guys an email, we got $50,000 from the Saginaw
Is there
Community
more
Fund.
grants that you could write?
There are more
Do
grants.
whatever we can do
Yep, we're
to
working
get
on,
that going.
Jenny and I are working on getting some
I would
DNR
like-
stuff together. I'm gonna try to find every foundation that says they'll give money to a government and
That's
apply. And then and there's and I mentioned this when I first started, there's a new, well, it's like 3 or 4 years old now, but there's a website called Patronicity, which is geared towards nonprofits and local governments, where you can take donations online, similar to GoFundMe. But in this particular instance, if you meet your goal, the state of Michigan matches your money one to one. So if we say we get $50,000 in donations, we will end up getting $100,000 from the
the-
project. So that might be a good way to, well, once we get grants and we might be tapped out of money that we can get from other places, that's a good way to fill
To
that
raise
gap.
money.
Yeah. If we-
Those handicap playthings, we had a handicapped grandson who is now deceased, and we still miss him. But when we would take him places with the other grandkids, it's a huge issue. What do you do? He was always sad, and we always tried to do different, somebody sit on the swings and hold him, somebody hold him and run around and the whole thing. But I think for children with any sort of handicap, it's a big issue. If you can get something like that every child can get on, and including non-handicapped, where they're all on the same thing, just doing different things maybe.
Swings they have are pretty awesome.
Yeah, that is a good thing.
Is that 5? Is that 5 the handicap?
Yeah.
Number 5?
Yeah.
Okay.
That-
We're on number 4, I guess.
That's
I
sorry,
don't
with
know.
pavilion roof is what we were,
Oh,
so that was
Roof
just
or
part of
park?
the,
Yeah.
that was
So-
a part of the park, I think, if we put that into the park thing.
So continue park improvements and then we can kind of have those under that goal.
And the DNRs, I would assume they're still very eager to fund handicapped requests, and this would be
And that's the other thing, it's not the park, but it goes along with that, but the handicap or accessible canoe and kayak launch. Cause
Yeah,
that's for
I
the
was-
seniors,
I
that's
was
for
gonna-
handicap, and it
I
goes
wanna
right
go
along with
down-
our
I
mission
wanna go down
statement for
the,
families. I mean, I've got, I don't know how many friends and family members that have handicapped or handicapped children,
Yeah,
or,
me.
the parents, it's just exactly.
Yeah, and I
And I was
can't,
gonna say,
get
yeah.
in the boat.
And
There's no place
that's what
to
the whole
step
thing
off
is, and
get in the boat.
if we could just get where you could the people could see one of these up front, they're the bomb. These little plastic floating, and the DPW just pull it out in the fall and put it away and slide it back in the spring. And it's the best.
What did you say it was called?
I sent you a link and I'll send it to you again, but it's a handicap boat launch, and they make them up to regular, you can put a flat bottom on it, but we only need one for like the kayaks or canoes, and they got benches where you sit down, slide into your kayak or your canoe, and it's on rollers, and you push yourself out,
Oh, yeah.
and then and then water comes up on it, and then when you're coming back in, you just go right back up on it, and you get yourself out. It's lets you say you can do something on your own.
That would be in the
It is
park.
the
That
best.
would be in Lumberjack.
Yeah, lumber,
And
is that what you're
I
talking
was hoping we could attach it to one of these other, even though it's not in the
Boat
park,
launch.
Oh, it
but
doesn't have to be at the park.
yeah, it would be
You
so
could
nice.
get-
Even at the boat launch, yeah, I'd love
Yeah.
to go down the river and I can't get
Exactly.
in the boat.
And Diane, we talk all the time about going out in the kayaks, it would
I
be
know.
so great.
And we never did get in the kayaks. I might come over to your house by myself.
Yeah, it would be so
Yeah.
great.
Not in my
It-
kayak once.
Everywhere we go,
But,
I mean, all the parks that we go to that have them, everybody just raves about them. I mean, they are really, we use them.
I would
And
like
we
to
I mean, we
go
use them
in
because
there.
it just makes everything so much easier.
Which
Yeah.
It's
the
great.
Lumberjack Park area would be
That would be-
perfect for there.
That
Yeah.
would be a good way to do it.
Hmm?
I think they have them over by the church.
I heard that, yeah.
And that's what every planner has told us to do, is to use our river
Yeah.
resources.
Yeah.
And that was
So-
my other thing, is if we could improve anyway, I know the DNRs, but fishing along the bank.
Yeah, or
Making
fishing
it
off of that
accessible.
rail trail.
Yeah,
They promised, when they
Yes.
did that rail
Yeah.
trail, they promised
Yes,
I
a
really like-
handicapped, accessible,
and they put it
thing.
out on
Yeah.
Swan
Mhm.
Creek Road.
Yeah, on, yeah,
and it was
isn't that
supposed to be
crazy?
down here in town, and that's not what they did, and I have been furious, and I know that for a fact, because I was at all those meetings.
Mhm.
But, they didn't do that, Jim.
yeah, I know it.
And that was wrong, because the original plan said that we would have a handicapped accessible fishing area right off on the bridge.
Oh yeah, I think they made one out of a semi truck down.
Yeah.
But didn't
the
they
river
also
front.
say that bridge wouldn't hold the platform?
Yeah, they said, oh, they couldn't
that
do
what they
that there.
told
Our
us?
They said-
bridge,
Yeah,
it'll hold a train.
Yeah,
yeah, it would, it said,
Yeah,
yeah,
but
you
to
would have
extend
to
out,
have
yeah.
Yeah,
It'll hold a
significant-
train full of coal, but it won't hold 10
Significant
kids fishing.
structural.
They came to a
changes
park
would
meeting
be,
and that's what
you
they
know,
told
I
us.
know.
prohibitive.
I know, but I
That
think,
was
I think
their
that
excuse.
everything that we do, and it should go along with our mission and for families and the outdoor oasis, And the parks, the flowers, the beautification, everything that we do, it should be based on that right now. I mean, improve what we've got. We're trying to say that for the park. We got a great park, we just need to do a facelift again, and we need to do that in town too, and make it so that people wanna come here and use it.
Mhm.
But we've got an expansive park system
We do.
for
There's a
small
lot of parks
town.
for
Yeah.
a small town, we
And-
really do. But we need, but I don't think we need any more, but I do think we need to work on the ones that we
I
have
think so,
and
yeah.
and
We've
get
got a
into
lot
other
of, we've got a
things
lot
that
of
we can
kids, a
do.
lot of seniors, and it's not fair to put them in the same category, but accessibility, we want everybody to access it, you know, to
And
be
you-
able to use it, we
When-
do.
When we drive around in that old convertible in the summertime, you know, and go to other communities use their parks a lot more than we seem to use ours, and that always distresses me. I mean, we've been towns where it was loaded with people having picnics, playing ball, I mean, unofficial ball games, you know what I'm saying, not at the league or whatever. And you don't see that, you don't see enough children outside here. I expect all summer long I should see kids, and I think they're inside on the telephones and,
They are.
and,
But
and
there
I-
are people out there, when I sit at Lori's, I mean, she's on the park, lives right on the park. And there's always people out there, there's always people walking, in the dog park, I mean, I see people over there quite
Oh,
often,
the
all the
walking,
time.
the walking's huge. I guess I
Yeah.
never realized, there's people at that park as soon as day breaks walking. I don't care if there's a snowstorm.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
It's
That
good
does get a
walking there,
lot
but I
of
think
people
there's a
walking.
lot
Well,
of
because
really
it's 1 mile,
good.
it's
They're really
exactly
good.
1 mile, they know
Well,
what
and
they
it's
want.
maintained where the rail trail is not,
No, it's
Yeah.
not.
you know. I mean, I walk that rail trail as much as I can.
there's not the
The minute the
dog,
first snow hits, they,
It's slippery.
you
there's
don't,
also
you
not
can't
the
use it
doggy
anymore.
doo-doo that's
But
on
they
the rail
plowed
trail.
it, so people still do use
No,
it.
they don't plow the rail
Oh,
trail.
they don't
no, and
anymore?
they don't want us plowing it.
Oh, I mean in our park.
Oh, in our park, yes, but
Yeah.
not the rail trail.
Yeah.
You don't touch that rail trail. They
I
haven't
know,
heard
that's
about it.
county.
Mhm.
I'd love to see us plow
If
the
we,
first
if we
mile,
scrape
but
that, do anything to that,
they have a fit.
yeah,
Yeah, they would.
we don't
Well,
wanna
they
touch
wanna
it.
use it for cross-country skiing.
Well, they don't want the liability. If you don't touch it, then they're not liable. But if
Yeah.
we plow it, then they're liable
Ah.
for it. That's why they don't do it.
That's why people like inside our park, cause the trail's kept up good.
Do we wanna put
That's another
the,
page. I have.
canoe livery on our list of things to at least
I
Get-
just to look at.
get
Some
quotes?
kind of
see
deal.
what-
Yeah.
see what-
Yeah.
To
And I'll
look
get you
at.
some more
So I
information
can
for
get
that.
the vote.
Not a specific budgeted item, but
Right.
start looking at it.
Start looking at it, yeah,
Well,
because it's gonna
another-
be more than just that,
Right,
there's gonna be
right.
you're gonna have to have a way to get down to it, I mean, so it's gonna be a project wherever we put it.
And I don't know if we got in, but like Lumberjack Park, that flower bed there, is that something, who maintains that? Is that supposed to be us? Is that the beautification day?
I think part of it along the road is maintained by, I wanna say Pam Jendersky. And then the part that goes from the road to the river is supposed to be us. It's been infiltrated by
Weeds.
some sort of vine.
Yeah,
Well, that
and the
stuff's
lumberjack is
terrible.
gone.
The
it
lumberjack,
gone?
the lumberjack is in the DPW barn. And
What's
Okay.
left of
it
them?
is- What's,
Yeah.
it's in okay shape, we should never put it outside.
Oh,
It's-
that's
How did,
I think his axe came off and
Yeah,
he's got
it's
some.
laying there
he's
is
got
all I
some
know.
How did
Yeah.
Tittabawassee Township, for their park, with that big, river walk thing that they have, where it goes right down the fishing, you know, and that park right next, I don't know
They
what they
do.
call that, but it's a ramp that goes down, it has
They have events down
benches,
there,
and
yeah.
how did they get
Oh.
that in there?
I'm
Because
sure
that
they
would,
used
they'd
to
have to
be
go
in
through
our-
the
Talking
same
the one
thing that
right
we
on
did.
47 there.
Right on,
Right in the middle of
Midland Road.
town.
Midland
It's
Road.
Right on
It's
Midland
on-
Road,
Is
is
that-
that?
Zimmerman?
I think that's Freeland
No.
Road right
I think it's
there.
Freeland
Or
Road.
is it the one
It's
where,
across
in
Tittable,
town.
it's like,
When you go into town at the light and turn left,
yes.
Yeah.
it's right there on the right.
oh, yeah.
Oh, I
Yeah.
really-
How,
Right.
because they have to
Right.
go through the
Up
same
by
road.
Wal- Where are we talking here? What road?
In Freeland, it's on Freeland
We're
Road,
talking-
or Tittabawassee Road.
Freeland
Just
Road.
to the west
What road
of
is that?
Tittabawassee River.
Yeah, Freeland Road. runs
Freeland
through-
Road.
Yeah, it's Freeland.
It had to be.
Oh, okay,
Freeland.
right downtown.
Right
Yeah,
downtown.
cause they'd have to go through the same hoops that we have
I'm
to go
guessing they
through.
got a grant for
I
that.
guess
Yeah.
either they
Maybe
It's
we
got,
all
could
handicap
contact-
accessible.
either they
and
got a
find out how
grant
they
or
got
they
that
found
and-
some benefactor.
Or
Yeah.
they use their walleye festival money and do
Oh,
stuff like
yeah,
that
that's
with it.
pretty good.
Possibly.
Yeah,
Can we
that's
find
a
out
pretty
on
good
that?
festival.
Yeah, I can
Cause
ask.
that'd be a
Because
good
that festival over
lead,
there is huge.
yeah, because they had to dig soil and do all that,
Mhm.
I mean,
They
this,
might have got money
this is
from
an awful
Dow,
lot question,
too,
but does
because
the
there was a
village
huge
get, how
issue
much
with
money
pollution
does the
in that
village get
water.
from the haunted house?
Could've gotten
We-
money.
Not
We
much.
ask for
Yeah, my
grants every year.
sister-in-law lives on that
They
river,
gave us
and they
2,500
even-
this year.
Because they get a lot of benefit from
I mean,
that
it comes
lumberjack
up
park, and
when-
there's
in
a lot of the
Well, that
damage
was
to the
spring-
little
Yeah,
gazebo
because she
came
has
from
the
when they had the
sandbag, she
haunted
has
house
a-
more than normal.
Yeah.
Is there any way somebody could approach them
And
to
she
try to
has
get a
to
little money?
sandbag.
Well, I'd certainly talk to them again, but,
To improve that.
they
way.
just,
That's one of
they have
those.
just cut us back so
You never
bad.
know what it
But
is.
We used to
that's
get
the vil-
15 grand
That's
from
the
them.
village's building, isn't it?
It is.
It is the
Mhm.
village's building, they use it for free, we do charge them
My husband
for
says, you know, that never
electricity
should've been
maybe?
allowed to happen.
You-
Do they pay the electricity
I
over
think
there?
they pay it directly.
Right,
I don't,
that's what I mean, they pay the electric bill to.
And they
the
do all the
Yeah.
maintenance, right?
Yes, they do.
well.
We don't do
We
maintenance.
Whatever,
don't,
Yeah.
we don't.
whatever
And
you
improvements
consider
are theirs.
maintenance.
Right.
We haven't done much.
But I thought we discussed that before, was
They've
that
done some improvements to the electrical
Electrical.
system.
they're responsible for that, yeah.
Yeah. But they still used to give us about $15,000 a year for the park.
And they
And
they have
stopped.
record
And they give it to
turnout every
everybody,
year.
known to man.
They've been giving us
They give the school a lot more money than they give us.
tons of money. They gave us the last 2 years
Did
$1,300.
they make us match it?
They don't make us match it.
Okay, we just match.
Yeah. So they gave us $1,300 the last 2 years, and then this year they gave us $2,500. I think it's going up. I think they had some revenue trouble with the economy. So now it's kind of building back up a little bit. They're giving us a little bit more money, but it definitely isn't 15,000.
Speaking about economy, I believe in sharing information. We were at a meeting this past week, and a UAW president of Local 699 was there. And he was talking about in the past 8 years, they've lost $3,500 or 3,500 people, 3,500 due to attrition. That's retirement, quit, changing jobs, all that stuff. They have like almost 1,000 people on layoff that have been laid off. They're looking at another round of layoffs for Delphi, and some of them will not be permanent. I think they expect only 10 of them to be permanent. But I think one thing when we're talking budgeting that we have to be cautious. Because that's the backbone of the economy in this whole entire
why-
area.
For fixing what we have instead of adding new.
And so we need to keep that in mind before we start spending any big money, is that people, and plus they gave concessions anyway. Those new people that work there have no retirement. Or retiree health care. They are having to pay in for their own benefits, which, that didn't happen. The guys that are on skilled trades in there now make less money now than my husband did when he retired in 1993, okay? We're losing, and he was talking about, we're losing skilled tradesmen to Ford and Chrysler. Anytime our skilled tradesmen are aware that there's an opening at Ford and Chrysler, they're going down there and because they have better salary and better benefits. So we need to keep in mind that our overall economic outlook is not too wonderful. Yeah.
Well, we don't wanna be, the reason Flint, as an example, is where they're at, is when they were the boom town, they always thought it was gonna keep going. So they never invested in the infrastructure, they just kept adding and adding, and then when it hit, and, Buick City and all these, it just, when they went away, they're left with an aging infrastructure that somebody else has to take care of, and we don't want.
Yeah, we don't.
We've got a
No,
beautiful
we're taking
park,
care of it.
let's,
But
we need a roof,
discontinue that
let's
because
fix it. We've
the
got the
outlook-
river, let's use it.
We're not pulling in
Yeah.
any new businesses.
But I think the value of fixing things when we can afford it is that when
It's
we
important.
can afford it, we don't have to spend money.
Right.
So that's the value of it.
Yeah, I don't believe in going into debt except for this next thing.
For what next thing?
Water, sewer and streets. I think we should look at well, not necessarily streets, water and sewer, a bond, for those storm sewers and the water. Those lines over there have got to be replaced,
Yes.
cause they break constantly.
And on that same note, that's why we have to get a water contract signed this year. If we're gonna bond, I think they're gonna require that we have a contract.
We don't have a contract yet?
Nope.
The
Why not? They don't wanna talk to us?
The water authority.
I don't
has
think
not-
the authority was high on their list, because the rate is the rate, it doesn't matter if you have a contract or not.
Right.
That's not important. The rate we don't care about, cause it's gonna be,
Well, we were talking a contract when I was manager.
well, you still don't have one.
Still don't have one.
It's been
Nobody's pushed it.
15 years. The
And
water
I think
authority
that's
has.
important, we need.
What does
to-
that
That's
mean?
about
What do we-
right.
It means that we're basically working off of the most recent contract provisions.
Yeah.
I think the water authority saw some new provisions in, contracts for other communities that they didn't like. So they said, well, there's no gain for us to sign a contract, so why would we? They can't not give us water, cause
They
we'll
can't cut
call
you off,
WNEMTV5.
and they won't cut you off.
But
They won't cut you off, but
They're making money.
were they
from it.
trying to?
They're still making money.
Yeah.
You're paying the same rate, it doesn't matter if you have a contract.
Was there something about? Is this a fight between us and Swan Creek and,
Thomas
I
Township.
don't think so.
not Thomas Township, the other one
James?
there.
James.
James,
James,
I don't think so.
cause we had a problem, I remember when I was the manager and Hal was the DPW guy, and they wanted us to pay for the water to, is it flush
Flush.
the system?
They still.
And whatever went through our meter, we had to pay for it, even though
And that's still
it
true
benefited
today.
Swan Creek and
If
James.
we, right, if we did
it's
flush,
still true.
it would kinda benefit them, but we haven't got into that situation.
So that's not part of that
I
contract
don't
with the
think
city
so,
of
that would
Saginaw.
be, that would be,
God, it
well,
seems like the city of Saginaw was trying to do
if,
something
right,
to
they,
us.
they would
Well, I-
like us to flush,
One of the things that I
But-
talked to Hal about and I talked to our attorney about was there's a provision in the new water contracts that, that any new development that requires a DEQ permit
Yeah.
that's commercial requires that we collect city income taxes for their
Wow.
well, the employees who work in that area and connect to our system would have to pay city income taxes
For Saginaw?
for the city of Saginaw.
well, yeah.
well,
And like, for instance, the
Yeah.
Meyer in Birch Run,
Right.
all of those employees pay income tax to the
they
city.
pay 0.5%, but
It's
The,
crap.
it is, but, okay, we can back up. The contract Spalding Township signed, which was boilerplate across Saginaw County,
Mm-hmm,
it's not necessarily Myers, but if you had a new permitted line, and that's not replacing what you have, but if you had a new permitted line where there was no customers, the contract stated that those connections would pay a fee to the city of Saginaw.
for a hookup, or
For
a
a hookup,
continual fee?
well, no, it was a one-time fee that went to the city of Saginaw.
So if we annexed in some property and extended a water line out to
Right.
them, those homeowners would have to pay a fee to the city of Saginaw
When they connected,
to hook into our line
right.
because
And
they're
we
using
maintain.
city water.
Because
But-
they're increasing demand on the plant.
Well, the
Okay.
city, when Andre Barello decided this, the city's thought was, we're losing people to out-community people because of our water. You wouldn't have, Bertrand, you wouldn't have had that Meyer if it wasn't for the city of Saginaw. So that's kinda how they,
Well, I
This was-
certainly never agreed with Andre, but that's okay.
but anyway, there's more to the story than
That's how
that.
we ended up with.
There's
the
more
board
to the
attorney.
story than that, but his, what is it, the provision he found in state law. If it was a business employed over 100 people, or I don't know
Oh,
what,
so it didn't,
wasn't every
include
business.
like residential property?
It was
Well,
business.
you would pay the one-time fee.
Okay.
But how Myers did it, or well, any business, their provision was if they had a new business over so many people, they paid 0.5% city income tax, we'll give X community, Village of St. Charles, Bertrand, you get a quarter of that, so that's how they sold it to them, and the poor workers paid for it, basically.
Okay.
So-
Oh, wow.
And you know,
But-
where that plays into, if you have a really smart lawyer, which Andre Barolo
Mhm.
Is, yes.
now he's a judge, but, they can find those loopholes, and I think basically what you need is a really smart lawyer to find you another one out.
Well, see,
Right.
that was our problem, cause Andre was the city of
Right.
Saginaw's attorney and our attorney,
Right.
and that's
But-
where the problem came in.
But through the grapevine, LB Township is part of that agreement, the city has not been enforcing that
They haven't.
connection fees, so that's,
And they sent us a letter.
That's not surprising.
The city-
so if they're not gonna enforce it, then how can they enforce it?
Yeah,
The city attorney sent us a letter a couple months ago saying, hey, we're ready to negotiate your contract, but we'll tell you when it's time, so
so we're waiting.
we're waiting.
But I think maybe we need to make it our goal within the next year if we're gonna
Okay,
bond.
so that we
need-
can bond.
We need to get a contract signed, cause it's not gonna affect what you pay. You're
On this
paying what
water
you
and
pay.
You're gonna pay it anyway.
Right, you're paying the
And
cost.
then in addition to for the bond, we'll also have to do a water system reliability study, which basically is like addressing how adequate it is for fire suppression and demand and stuff like that. And we've already been kinda talking with Spicer about, what that would mean and giving us a quote on how much it
We
would cost.
did that before when we
Is
bonded.
this
Probably
something that Spicer will take a
15
look at?
Or 20 years ago, you did a
That's Chris's
reliability study.
suggestion,
Oh, it's
Oh.
even longer.
the water
What's
and
that,
sewer,
Longer.
System, so is that something
That-
that
that
Spice
was
is
a
going to come through
late
in
90s,
Spicer's?
That was a-
probably.
Well, Spicer's
Yeah, that was a
already
I think
doing it,
that's-
30-year
so
bond.
Okay.
No, I'm talking the
our
reliability.
asset
Okay.
management plan,
That was the
it
DEQ
puts us
back then.
ahead of the
wanted
game
everybody
on
to
the
do it.
bonding front in terms of what projects we need to do. We're already gonna identify them through this asset management plan that we've been working on for the last couple of years. In terms of the bond itself, we're gonna have to go out and find a bond counsel to create the financials. for
John
this.
Axe always did ours, I don't know if he's still out
Is
there or
that
not.
something we're gonna charge our residents, or how does that work?
Well, generally, when I was in the city of Saginaw, we were working on a bond. You pay the consultant directly for the work that they're gonna do. So the water fund would pay whoever 50,000, 80,000, however much it's gonna be to prepare the work for us. So we'd pay it, and so the customers would pay that through their fee. I don't think.
You don't raise the water.
We wouldn't
No.
raise
Okay,
it for
'cause,
that.
Yeah,
We
Yeah,
would just
It's
budget
like a
for it.
one-time fee to them, and they take you through that whole process and
Right.
get the bonds and sell the bonds.
Yep.
And then you count the bonds, love that. And then you have to make sure you have them all there and everything is in place.
Yes.
But they walk you through that,
Yes.
and you can't do it on your own.
No.
Usually you have an attorney that does
You have an
it.
attorney.
Well, that's what John Axe says, he's an attorney
and
that does bonding.
Attorney, and then in there someplace, there's gonna be a market person, somebody who goes and
And
sells
sells them.
these bonds on the market,
but
because,
that's something we're going to do internally, then, I mean, it's not gonna go out to our customers then,
we'll,
Okay.
we'll pay for that initial consulting work
right?
as a budgeted item in a year, where we wanna do it. So if we wanna get that prepared now, say if it's in this budget, we would go out and ask for quotes and figure it out and then budget for it. And it would just be a normal line item budget we would pay.
And then what you do with it, you get a payment, the bond payment, which we had, and we just finished up
Right,
last
and we
year.
pay it each,
Okay, so that 30,000 or whatever, it happens to be $60,000, $80,000 a year, that is included in
The water rate.
your water bill.
Yeah, indirectly, you're gonna pay
But
for
we
it.
shouldn't have to,
Right.
unless it goes over 30,000, it should be in there,
They're
floating
gonna-
around right now, we should be making that money rather than spending
Right,
it.
at the moment, we are. The asset management plan process that we're going through right now is including a water rate study, financial analysis. So
Mhm.
they're gonna tell us what our rates are gonna need to be to bond out projects based on our level of service we choose.
Or to stay afloat.
Or stay afloat.
Because right now, that $30,000 is, we're not spent, well, it was like 35, I think, with interest and stuff, but that is now in there, just sitting in there,
Would-
supposedly.
Which that would have been part of your capital improvement plan.
Yes, and then if we decide, oh, we've got plenty of money, we don't have to raise the rates. Well, yeah, you should have, because now you're getting rid of the $35,000 that you had in there as an equity, because you decided to not raise the rates and keep it at the same level.
Right.
But I'll explain that better when we get there, Matt and I will work on that.
well, I certainly hope so, because you know how I am.
Once we get into talking about bonds and that financial nightmare,
Right,
that will be one of those meetings where we'll have to make 8 pots of coffee and.
Well, and it's something, it's the only way we're gonna be able to fix what really has to be fixed.
Right.
There's some old lines over there, and that's why we didn't pave those streets.
Mhm.
Why
Yes.
pave the streets, we're gonna have to tear out the water
Right.
lines anyway.
I agree, we gotta
And,
fix it.
and then did tear out those streets, cause they broke in the winter, and
that
you had
came
to
up
tear them
when
up
Hal
anyway.
was here too, because.
And then it
Hal
creates
found
another
that.
problem, and every time those
Yeah.
break,
Yeah.
it's another problem. It's
And
just-
you know, everybody's street was paved except them four. And
Yeah.
I always felt so bad for them. I understand why they weren't, but I still felt bad for them. I mean,
Well, we have them written down, and they were gonna be done free, but now we don't have to worry about that anymore because we have the
The new
street
thing.
paving thing.
yes,
The
yes,
asset management
as soon as we
plans
get
are
enough
gonna
money to
dic-
pay them.
the asset
Well,
management
it's in there,
plans
it's
are
in
gonna
there.
dictate to us the streets and the sewer projects, so it's gonna be scientific this time. So, you know, where we have all kinds of things that need to be fixed, that's probably gonna be where we start.
And have we
at
gone
least.
through 2 years of the higher taxes?
Yep.
Yes, yep.
So there's $140,000 in there already.
There's,
Well,
well, we
we
had
needed
this-
some of it to pay a little bit
Yeah,
of
we
the
had-
end of it, but,
we had to pay for parts of Beaver Road.
yeah,
But I think there was 132,000.
okay.
Not to live here. But that's not
So-
gonna pay for roads
This
by
is-
any means.
This will be our
Well, no, but
third
it'll pay
year.
for one.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think this is our upcoming, will be our third year of that.
do you think you'll need a, Spicer to pave a road?
Well, like, me and Matt were talking, if we do a water project, some of that water bond can pay for part of that road. We won't be able to justify the whole road, but maybe 25 to 50%, I don't know, whatever it is. You're gonna need inspections, I mean, that's part of the, part of the job.
Cause those 10 miles that we did, we didn't have,
It depends if you're just paving or
We
you're
were just paving.
reconstructing, that's a whole new ballgame.
well, we were ripping up and putting down, but
But-
that's it.
If you're just pulverizing and repaving is one thing,
That's
but
what
if
we were
you're
doing.
reconstructing the whole road,
Like Beaver Road.
yeah, if we're gonna do a holistic approach, you're gonna need an engineer.
Okay.
I
And
mean,
they have,
Cause that's the only way I was able to do that.
Right, you
Yeah.
save
Leave
a
out
lot of the
engineering.
cost,
they're
just,
gonna be,
that's a lot different.
they're gonna provide us with recommendations on like the level of maintenance or the, you know, how far do we need to go with this road or that road based on the rate that it received. So we'll be able to tell what we need to do to that. And if it's, you know, I don't know, I know that we used to do, what is it, a mile a year
A
for
mile a year for
$80,000
10 years.
For $80,000.
$80,000.
I think just talking with Spicer and looking at that might be an unrealistic goal at this point. But once we get to the point where Spicer is presenting us with this stuff, they'll explain to us how to approach it. So, and that's.
Well,
coming
keep
up.
in mind that Spicer knew I wasn't using them, and I don't think they were thrilled with it, but
Yeah.
they did all other stuff anyway, so.
We have
Yeah, 'cause
Jehovah's Witnesses or
No, I think it's the
Mormons up here.
mailman. I think it's the mailman with somebody timing them. They went down through here.
But I mean, you know, I don't know what year it was, like Fulton Street, all they did was pave over it. Well, there's an old water
Mhm.
line under it. When the time comes when we replace that water line, you're not just gonna pave the road, you're gonna.
Well, and
mill
don't
it.
you think, as long as, although I don't think it'll be a problem over there, but if we're going by an empty lot, let's run a line to it.
Oh, service, you
That
mean?
service
Yeah.
line, so that, I'll never forget we did Walnut Street, and it wasn't 3 weeks after we were done, somebody needed a
applied for it,
line.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and there's an added complexity that just popped into my head about this water bond, and that is the lead and copper stuff.
Yeah,
If we're gonna bond out water projects, we may want to include replacing our service lines. And I know that replacing individual home service lines isn't what we wanna do.
well, if they're lead,
Well, the problem
it
is,
doesn't
Well,
matter if they're lead,
there's a
if they
problem,
might be,
if they may have
galvanized
ever
Ever
or
been,
lead.
Or ever
If
had
they-
the possibility.
Exactly, a
Oh.
lead
and
connection.
if you don't know,
Right.
Yeah.
then we have to assume it is lead.
And I have to tell you how complex this is. I was talking to a federal representative that comes out and talks to people. He's under the impression, this guy, that his subdivision is just fine because of the date that it was all built.
Mhm.
I said, you know what, you better take a look at what it is the state is actually saying, because you might even wanna, because it's so much more involved in any kind of federal regulation, that's not the case. They're not gonna say, well, okay, your subdivision was built here, so we know that all the lines are, no, not unless they have concrete proof there, right? And I don't think most people, even people in politics, understand what it is the state is gonna try to do here. We have a visitor.
Excuse me, please.
How can we help you?
My wife is over at the Union Court, and she has 3 rings. And we're trying to find some way we could get them off, and we wondered if you folks did that kind of service.
Like rings on her fingers?
Yeah,
Her hands are swollen?
yeah.
No, that you,
I
you'll
think you'd
need
have
to contact a nurse or something. We,
I have to go to
Probably go to the
emergency.
I don't know.
possibly the hospital,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay. But
They
you're
probably have
just-
to be
Cut
cut.
off. Yeah.
They'll probably have to be cut.
Yeah,
I'm afraid so.
If she's at Union Court, you could contact their medical staff and they can point
No,
you
there
in the
isn't
right.
anybody there today,
Okay,
Oh, okay.
and, so,
Is it cutting off circulation? Is that the thing
well,
right
that's
now?
a concern.
I don't know what.
But we thought maybe the fire department might have some, and we tried to get a hold of the people from MMR. and
Most likely,
MMR says,
Yeah.
well, we'll take you to the hospital.
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's what we would do.
They'll take a saw at the hospital. They have the,
yeah,
The
they got
equipment.
clippers, you can just.
I don't think
move it.
anybody else, I mean, you wouldn't wanna take a Dremel tool,
No.
but they,
Oh, goodness, no.
yeah, you know what I'm saying? They have special equipment at
they
the
do,
hospital
they
for
can just
that.
clip them.
Yeah,
Very good, thank you very much.
thank you.
Have a good day, good
Good
luck.
luck with
Good
that.
luck, yeah.
I almost said, well, Jen, that's your job, go do it.
I can barely put baby fingernail finger clips.
Oh, I was
Don't freak
petrified to
out.
do that.
I never had a problem with that, ever.
But back to
Cut Charlotte's
the,
finger already
if we
once,
do a
just
water,
little bit, but I'm like.
typically when you place a water
Over
main, you
two,
put a new
okay.
water service to the property.
Okay.
So that would get us halfway there if the law stays currently as it is.
Okay.
You don't hook an old service to a new main.
Right.
Well, and then the new regulation says that you can't do a partial replacement, so if we do water line up to the curb box, we have to do water line all the way into 18 inches inside the house. So,
Or to the meter.
or to the meter, whichever.
Which is what they're
closest.
asking
Whatever.
for right now
Okay,
anyways.
and who pays for that?
The water bond and the water customers.
We do.
pay for that.
But they will for their, for their.
You,
they
the
will through
customer
their water
inadvertently
rates.
pays for it, yes.
They will through their water.
We, the
rates.
Well, that's,
customers
but
will
that's
pay.
us, yeah, come on, that's us too.
Well, it's
Yeah.
you.
The
Yeah,
water
me,
system as a
yeah.
whole,
Yeah.
Anybody who lives in the water system would pay for
Yeah.
their rates.
inadvertently through your,
Yeah. So it, you'll notice an increase most likely, but it's not gonna be, it'll probably be a few dollars here and there, even though it adds up. And they'll tell us how much it will be when we get to the bonding part. And actually, that lead and copper rule is gonna make our bond requirement much larger than it would normally be.
Right.
So we paid $30,000 a year for the previous one, we may be thinking way more than that.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to do it, and I can't imagine there's any better way to do it other than roll it into the bond, because otherwise, we're just gonna be paying out of the budget every year, and that, I don't think that's,
You're the budget man.
that's not probably sustainable, because we're talking $5,000 for each house, we've got almost 1,000 of them, so.
And now, I mean, and this includes, I mean, you got the water line, then you've got the digging it up, you've got the replacing all the soil, the plants, the
Grass,
sidewalk,
yeah,
whatever it
yeah.
is that's out front, parts of driveways. I mean,
Yeah,
we don't
maybe,
know until
yeah.
each one is gonna be
Different.
completely different every single time.
And then we gotta pay an inspector to go to every single water service.
Exactly.
And man, I got plastic, I think it's plastic coming from the water meter up to my house, and inside's all plastic. They make me replace that?
Most likely, cause we can't do a partial repair.
Yeah.
Well, we're only gonna be responsible to the meter 18 inches inside the wall.
Well, we're not gonna replace her water line anyway.
No,
It's
not
new.
in the house.
No.
Well, and
We're not gonna be Flint
If-
in the
if
house.
the line, so what we'll do
We're
is,
talking where Jim is, that whole,
we'll do an inventory
Yeah.
of,
Yeah.
well, the water line itself, in terms of the lead and copper rule, we may have to replace the whole system wide. Whether that's.
Whether
in-
it's part of the road or not,
Whether it's
where we're
part,
working.
whether
yeah.
it's part of this system or not, so,
but if I were Union Court, I'd just sit tight, because they're gonna get new
They're gonna
parking anyway.
get all new. Well, they got what, 3 service lines
Mm-hmm.
that are gonna need to be replaced?
And their streets are the ones that are up to date.
Well, they have one
too.
service line, but they have 3 services out there.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Well,
Okay, so I'm looking at 6 numbers there, right?
What was
Yes.
number 5? I missed.
I had 5 kayak, handicap launched, and it's a lumberjack park,
Oh,
just start
Oh,
looking
I
at
had the
it.
handicap play equipment as number 5.
I had that as
That's
number
what I
4
got.
with
I had the
pavilion.
pavilion roof,
Let
we
me-
put them together.
let me recap what I have.
Okay.
'Cause it's very different from what I'm hearing. So, we went through 1 through 3, so we all know that one. But number 4, I have continue park improvements.
yep,
And then I just have a list of the stuff we talked about.
Okay,
And so I have a number 5, which is currently blank.
well, yeah,
okay,
cause I
so
was
you
thinking,
have pavilion roof, handicap play, and canoe ramp, under park.
that's what I was
Yeah,
thinking, if
all
we
that
can get those
stuff.
grants and everything, and you said DNR, involvement, then that would probably be all underneath that one.
So you're not
Yeah.
including the water sewer in there at all now at this point?
If, not yet, if that wants to be number 5,
So number 5 would be just continue
investigate.
checking on water, sewer.
Yeah, continue asset management and consider infrastructure replacements.
Which is not really a budget item, it's just a due item.
What was 5?
Water and
Oh,
sewer.
Water and sewer.
that word.
I think that's pretty good.
I think that's a pretty hefty,
Yeah,
that's
plan
enough,
right there.
yeah.
Yeah. And all of them could still be on here next year.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean,
that's,
in the next
yeah,
year,
I would
and
like
that's
to
what,
see
that's
it.
what I'd like, I'd like something
Yeah.
that if we don't get to it this year, then
Do
maybe bump it up, but
Yeah.
if something else comes in,
Yeah.
you know, it's still on there.
But
And
that
we can
ground
still
cleanup
pick
being
away at
number
these
1,
things.
I like that, because that's, we have to do that.
Oh, the driveway parking lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's tough.
So the,
I'm so disappointed in that company. I mean, the way they talk to them, we have, you know.
Right, and we don't have anything.
Yeah.
Oh, I think you better be disappointed more with
The
the state
state.
than the company, but
Well, that's true.
oh, of course.
Always disappointed with the state.
Do we want to continue the street sign project?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So we'll just move that, I'll add that as number 6.
and I
Okay.
think,
Although
This-
it should be the first one, because it didn't get done this year. But that's okay.
Well, and then the question is, are these in priority order, or, you know what I mean?
No, they're just out there.
They're just out there, so if we
Money
have-
will determine the priority, I do believe.
Well, I think number 1 is
Some of them are
number
quite
1.
large items.
They are.
To me, the parking lot cleanup, that has got to be number 1.
Well, and I think the street sign is important too, because they're looking a little shabby.
Street signs, and then I'll add under street signs, the gateway signs.
Well, and I might mention that we would not put the logo on the street sign because that really upsets the MDOT people.
Really?
Because our birds are not flying in the same direction that the street goes. I'm not kidding you, that man wanted me to change out every sign in here, because it would say Spruce Street, but the bird would be flying that way. So we're telling people Spruce Street is that way. I said, no, I'm not. I'm telling them that this is West
Spruce
Spruce
Street.
Street.
yeah,
But you've got the bird going the wrong way, and I thought, oh, you better get out of
Good
here.
discussion.
Because this is
No
not
birds.
gonna go well,
Did you tell them that birds fly in whatever direction they
wherever
choose?
they wanna go.
Go
Yep.
one way.
Usually south around this time of
Yeah.
year.
Why didn't you tell him go wherever you wanna go?
Well, yeah, oh, he's such a little,
so then are we gonna continue the trees and add the sidewalk back onto that?
well, we're gonna work on the sidewalk thing.
Yeah, I think
That's
so.
just a matter of adding $5,000 to the budget as a matching thing.
And the same thing
Okay,
with the
alright.
trees, I think last year it was a priority because the previous year we had tons of
Right.
dangerous tree projects. And we can still keep the money in some of the money in the budget, like we have $10,000 budgeted for trees, haven't spent it. So in the next budget, maybe we do 5,000 for trees, 5,000 for sidewalks or something.
Well,
And-
and honestly, the tree, like with your sidewalk, I don't wanna, but, it would have been replaced anyway with the
Yeah.
tree with the ordinance that's already in place.
Yeah, and it's on our to-do list to
Yeah.
replace that section that was heaved.
Yeah,
Because you had a tree that heaved it, so,
Yep.
honest to God, very few people came in here and asked.
no, and now, you know,
Go back.
after we were talking about it, you know, we're talking about replacing the things and stuff, and it'd be nice to just drive around, like you had said, cause you took care of that sidewalk over, at 308. You know, once in a while, snow blowing or whatever. It'd be nice to know where these ones are and put them on a list. You know, this one, when we get going on it, this one's one that we're gonna have to fix, you know, it's cracking, heaving.
Well, you're actually supposed to,
Yeah, it'd be nice to,
go and paint the ones that are
Oh.
over an inch to warn people that there's an inch there.
and that's what they
Yeah,
And
did.
then
I read that, and
replace
it's like,
it.
man, if you did that, you're gonna,
I
Mine-
know.
Mine was
Mine
bright
could
orange
have
when
been
they-
We have a
painted.
town that
Yeah.
looks like a tiger.
I'm gonna have a lot of paint marks in front of my house.
Yes, you are.
Supposing we end up with sidewalk, more, we say we're gonna put 5,000 in there, right? Okay. Suppose through this winter, there's just sidewalk after sidewalk. Can we take from the general fund and transfer some money
can amend the
over and
budget.
just
Yeah,
amend
well,
that?
and you won't even have to amend the budget, we can take money from an account that we haven't spent what we thought and move it within,
yeah.
within the parameters.
Within the budget,
So say,
not from water to general.
no,
No.
say,
But
say-
anywhere in
say-
general.
so we have the sidewalk money, it used to be in the local streets. So within local streets, if we didn't spend what we thought on whatever, we can take some of that and move it over.
Okay.
And so, and some of that will depend on whatever policy that council approves with.
And
the
that's what I was kinda
sidewalks.
talking, is that not just for when people wanna replace theirs, but just a proactive approach, seeing them and saying, okay, you know, these ones we know we're gonna have to put money at.
Well, supposedly what we're supposed to do is go up to that homeowner and say, this sidewalk must be replaced. And so, when I did that, it was, this sidewalk must be replaced, but we have a program that will pay for half of it.
Right.
So, but you still have to replace it.
Yeah,
So it's the homeowner's responsibility to keep the
But you have
sidewalk.
to get
yes,
bids
I-
on
yeah,
it.
exactly.
You get
In
bids
good
and you have to get
Yeah.
that
But before it
approval
gets,
from the village.
you know, letting them go and letting them go,
Absolutely.
I'd like that
Absolutely.
proactive,
Yeah.
and just,
So,
Well, that's
so,
kind of what it
so
was
that
set up
comes
for
in the
into,
first place.
you know, there may be a situation where we have to special assess sidewalks for people who refuse to pay for it.
Mhm. Or if, whenever it gets put in on Walnut Street.
because they're gonna have to be made to the
That would all
new
be a special
ADA
assessment.
compliant, and some of them
Well, and
Aren't.
if we have enough, and I know this was a hiccup with when Hal was here, because the folks there don't want a sidewalk on their property. But if we have sufficient right of way, we can put a sidewalk in front of their house and
Well,
we can
and,
pay
and
for
see
it.
there, then Cervini talked about that safe, it's some sort of safe walkway to school program where you,
Safe
schools,
routes.
schools can get grant money to do that. Now, I think they need to get on that, I do think, and my husband has fits that some child is going to get hurt out there. Because I don't, no matter what you tell kids, they, you know, yes, you must walk down Maple, well, you know.
Oh, but they won't do that.
Oh, no, no,
When they
you
were
could,
dark,
you could
school-
put sidewalk
school
in with
walked
moving
away.
sidewalk, and them kids wouldn't get on it.
Right,
I'm
right.
guaranteeing you.
I know it.
I go school bus for 21 years, wherever they are is in the middle of the
street.
darn road.
And,
Always.
but my husband gets so upset. But I do think a sidewalk down through that street makes perfect sense. But I do think that's something we need to pursue with the school, because I think if the people didn't have to pay for, I mean, the whole issue with sidewalks are, this town has a historical problem with sidewalks. But, you know, you're gonna have to pay for it and you're gonna have to maintain it, you know what I mean, and we're gonna require you to do that. Well, you know, that raises everybody's hackles right off the bat, you know? So I think even if you're gonna have to maintain it, if you can get some kind of program to put it in there so they don't have to pay for it,
Right.
that takes a lot of the burden off right there. And that's just
Did
my
I
way of
mention
looking
that
at
I
it.
was made to put a sidewalk in on Maple Street?
About 45 times
I know,
in the
well, and I'm
past
telling you,
year.
That's what you have to do. Then I didn't know that that's what you have to do, but now I know, because I didn't work here then.
Well, if
I just fought it, but it is what you have to do, and you know what, you get over it. You do get over it, and you sweep, you do the things to the sidewalk you're supposed to do, you pay the money on your taxes, because they break it down, but our problem is, where do we get the money for the sidewalk? In our funds,
Up
to,
front.
to float the loan to ourselves for the people to pay back.
yeah.
Well, you can either do it out of the general fund.
Yeah, well, we're already using the boatworks fund for something else.
Right, well, in terms of comparison for cost, the environmental thing is way outside of the realm of what a normal, so I mean, a sidewalk is gonna cost probably less than $1,000 for most people's stance of their home. So that And when we go to the, Public Works Committee to talk about this policy, I almost think that there should be an annual cap to that. A cap to how much the program would be, cause otherwise if people think that they're gonna get lots and lots of money for their sidewalk, we might get a flood of them, and then that float might become a problem. But, the
Oh,
general.
you mean like when over 5, when that's done, you say, oh, you'll have to wait till next year.
Right, yeah.
Well, that's why I was saying,
It's not gonna happen.
That's
I'd like
general
that,
fund.
the proactive one to be kinda separate, where we're just going out and doing it, not saying, hey, would you like yours replaced, you know, or you have to, you know, just, this one is bad, it's because of a tree, it's because of something else, that's gotta be
It was
done.
only meant to
Yeah.
replace 3 or 4 squares. of
Yeah.
it.
And we'll do, and that's coming out of right now, the streets funds.
Okay.
So that's where.
It did then too. Don't we have to spend so much money at that street fund on stuff like sidewalk?
We do, and I actually made myself a note to mention that right now. because
Oh,
we-
okay.
We have to come up with a project to spend at least $3,000 for our non-motorized, projects. Because there was a big project in the and so, let me explain, let me back up. There's a 10-year rolling average that we have to keep up with our Act 51 money. And I think we have to spend 10% over 10 years on average of our gas and weight tax funds on non-motorized projects. And a big project from 10 years ago dropped off and changed our calculation. So we're $3,000 and some change behind the ball. So this year, in order to be compliant,
Well,
you know,
what
Well,
about
like the
those
rail
ramp-
trail in the park, I think that's the big project that was probably out
it
there.
is, yep.
Well, like the sidewalks, we were talking where, Judy put in the sidewalk, she didn't add the correct
Ramps.
ramps. Would that count towards something like that on the sidewalks, where we're gonna have to put them in anyways?
Possibly I have to.
Find
so
spots
any-
that
any
need those
project that we
and do
come
them
up
right
with-
now, I mean, that's,
Any project
Most
that
of
we
them
come
have
up
been
with,
I-
we have
it
to
looks
consult
pretty
with
good.
some
I mean,
guy
it
at
does.
MDOT. There's a guy at MDOT who's in charge of non-motorized traffic, and we have to actually submit a plan. It can be just a one-page letter telling what we're gonna do, and I have a booklet of, authorized projects.
Can we plant wildflowers?
No,
There-
and,
The DOT has a wildflower planting project where you think your money's going to pay to fix state roads. Well, there's a whole big section set off to plant wildflowers. I find that so offensive, it's not funny. But, that was just all silly remark, but anyway.
we can do signage as long as it has to do with a motorized plant or a non-motorized pathway. We can put in a pathway in a park or anywhere as long as it connects 2 streets. So if we wanted to put a pathway in Waterfall Park or something,
we
it would
could do
have,
that.
it would have to go from like 52 to Pine, or to Spruce Street, cause it has to be a connectivity thing.
Does the Dan Hellman signs directing people how to get to places, does that count?
It's very specific, it has to do with non-motorized transportation. So if we put a sign up that said rail trail this way,
So that one over there,
it may,
I
it
see
may
what you
be,
mean.
but
I'm not opening the door.
oh, they're
Could he,
leaving.
could they pay for the structure of the sign to put their sign, and then some other signs could be attached to it?
I don't know, I would have to ask
This
the
might
guy.
be kinda great, but.
I would have to talk to the guy.
Okay, yeah.
But we have to spend $3,000 of our streets money on non-motorized stuff.
good.
Yeah.
So like a nice walking path to the softball diamonds.
Has to connect
Yeah.
to
The street.
streets.
To a street, Parkway drives the street.
It has to go
But
from
it
one
would have to
street to
come from
another.
Parkway, all the
Okay.
way.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe if we made a horseshoe path, or so, I don't know. It's very, very specific and a little weird. It's a little odd,
Okay.
but, or, you know, we could do line painting. We could put a
We do
Lighting?
need to redo line painting on Walnut Street, it's really hard to tell up there where you're driving.
I mean, we could put a bike lane on the other side of Walnut Street.
Could it go for electrical lighting, anything like that?
I'd leave
don't-
that bike lane and no more bike lanes, one down through there I think is
Good enough.
plenty. From the craziness I've seen on that street.
I mean, is that a bike lane supposedly or a walking?
No, that's a walking.
That's supposed to be walking, but there, you know, at the same time, you get a lot of nonsense going on.
Well, if it's gotta connect to a street and we're already talking possibly something like the canoe livery, could it be like doing the gravel path or a nice sturdy walkway down to the water from the road?
I don't know that. I'd have to
I
ask.
mean,
Does it have to be a major street or a side street?
and then you can connect
Major
two
or local.
projects.
Major or local, either one would work.
That'd benefit a little park down there and everything.
Mhm.
I mean, that would, cause that's all mud.
Mm-hmm.
Or you know how,
That would
well,
really,
this just popped in my head, behind the haunted house, there's that sidewalk there.
yeah.
We could upgrade it to a walking path or something.
Well, like Jim was saying, could you justify a Stone Creek path to the river and that would be a start, or extending that sidewalk across the road?
I mean, I don't know, I'd have to ask.
I mean, that's
I bet if-
technically from the street.
if
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
If we put it in context of connecting one street to another, then I think that's where we get,
That's what they're
that's where we get our authorization.
Okay.
So maybe if we paid for a path from the canoe livery up over the hill and then down behind the haunted house and connect Water Street and East Bell, maybe that's how we would get away with that.
Like steps going down the
It might
hill?
be more than $3,000.
That's a little more than three.
I
though.
know, I'm just trying to think of
It
something
would
that
have
would
to be
already
in increments,
benefit.
so-
But yeah, 3 this year,
Well-
3 next.
Cause if we
Yeah.
could tie a couple of these projects together.
Yeah,
Well, and the
That
other
would
thing
be
to think
nice.
about too with that canoe livery is if it's handicap accessible, what's the point of having a handicap accessible canoe livery if you can't
Can't
get
get
something
That's,
Yeah.
there?
and that's why I was saying, you
Yeah.
gotta put it someplace where you can get to it, yeah.
Yeah.
How
so-
are the bricks from by Burns's office to the waterfowl gazebo? Are
They
those
are
in good shape or?
They're heaving up like this in the middle, so those are pretty bad. Those probably should be fixed at some point. I think, actually, when we were doing the waterfall park last year on beautification day, somebody from the Lions Club said that they might wanna fix those for us, cause that's part of their, I think actually maybe they put them in the steps, I don't know.
My neighbor did,
I think they- okay.
but he's mad right now, so don't ask him right now.
Maybe if you ask him and pay him something.
He's the ones that,
Or
that
maybe
Billy.
he wants a lot of something. Yeah, I know
So,
her neighbor.
so anyways, yeah, those are the parameters. There's very specific requirements for the non-motorized stuff, so anything we do, I'll have to run it past the guy
Yeah.
to make sure it fits within their criteria.
I'd like to tie it into something that we're already talking about, it'd be cool.
So maybe, if you guys want, one of these projects while we're going through, we can come up with a plan for that.
Mm-hmm.
But we definitely have to do it, and I have to give him an official plan that we wanna do, so. Which one of these seems like the most feasible project?
something to do with the handicap thing.
I think so.
That's what I was thinking, you know, maybe we can't buy it. but
Well,
we
now,
could at
another
least
thing,
Maybe,
Put in the base for it.
it might look good though, so say they say, okay, great, we like the idea of connecting East Bell with Water Street, but the rest of it doesn't connect, so, if we pay for some of that stuff, and then they pay for the rest of the pathway or something, then,
Yeah,
yeah.
find the parameter, see what they, yeah. I'd like it to go for something that, like the handicap, I would.
Alright.
We've already talked about unfunded liabilities, haven't we?
Yes.
Okay.
What's the personnel part of it?
I was just gonna make mention about the policies that council approved last year. The personnel stuff is kind of on autopilot. Everybody's got 2%
Mm-hmm.
increases, so that's.
So you know how to figure that and
We
put
know how
that
to,
in there.
we know how to figure that. There are a couple of employees who are not on that plan. Tito and Jason, and then, Ben Jamie. So they're not, those, I think those are the only three not on the plan. But, I don't think giving them anything less or more would be appropriate. Treating everybody the same is kind of the goal,
So, they're not on the step-up plan list
They're not because they were hired they're from way back.
They are from way back.
They've been here for a long time, so
So
they're,
they'll just keep getting the 2% raises?
that's what,
Because we'll
So-
come to a point where none of the other people are getting 2% raises.
that's true. That's true. I don't know if council
Let's
wants.
wait 6 years and see.
I was gonna say,
what's
let's
left.
let's do that 5 years.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't know if we wanna mess with the turnip truck right now.
No,
I think Tito is thinking a couple years he's going.
I think it'd be great to stir up the pot in Don's garage.
And I think,
Leave me out of this for now.
I think Jason's here for a little while longer. but,
Yeah.
yeah.
We'll just have to work with that when we get there.
Yeah. So, it
And
would-
we'll see in your budget then the cost for salaries
yes,
and all that'll be in the thing that we're gonna be presented in
No,
February.
you better ask him for a separate breakdown of what I think you're looking for. Because, yeah, it'll all be related, it'll all be in the
But
budget,
yeah,
but if
but
you don't
not-
feel like
yeah.
adding it all up,
we can give you like,
just give us a sheet
so what I
that
did
says-
last year is I keep their names off of it, but what I do is by position, I'll give you the salaries.
Right.
So, you know, police
No,
officer.
you don't have,
Police officer number one
you
makes
don't
X
have to
amount
keep
of
their
dollars.
names off of it.
Well, I know, but,
You just don't, I mean, it's public knowledge. Cause if I walk in and say to you, I wanna know who these people are that are making this money. And if Joe Blow
Or
comes
what
in
they're
off the
making.
street and
I
says,
know.
I wanna know who these people are.
I know it's public knowledge,
I mean,
but,
please understand that it all used to be in the newspaper, so it's out there.
yeah, so we'll give you the salaries and you'll see that.
And then the cost of the benefits, total
It'll
cost
all
of
be
benefits.
together, so when I give you the salary, it'll have a breakdown. Salary, healthcare, retirement
Retirement.
costs, all that stuff, it'll be in
Yeah.
a little form for you.
Well, then on the other side, give us a list of all the people that work for us, and then maybe we can try to guess who makes what.
We'll make a game out of it, it'll be like Battleship.
I don't like games like that with money, come
I,
on.
no, but I don't know the names of the people that work here anymore, and I
Right.
should.
And, okay, and like our retiree costs for the past year too, will that be in there?
Yeah, you'll see
See,
it.
that's all over the place.
I know
You'll
that,
see
but-
it in, that new fund we created, so
Okay.
it'll have, when we present the budget to you, it has the previous year's activity and then the new budget stuff. So you'll see what we paid last year and what we expect to pay this year.
And then in that fund, it's gonna tell you what we're gonna pay out this year,
Yeah,
in its own fund.
I have to take a couple pain pills and adjust my glasses before I look at that budget. It's like, oh my goodness, I'm gonna have a headache.
I just find it like a giant Easter egg hunt.
Oh,
Trying to find it.
No, I try to
Asset
find
management,
what he's doing
investigate
different.
bond projects,
For the sewer.
I think for all of it, asset
Yeah.
management
Okay.
stuff.
I'm getting cold in here again.
Yeah, we will have,
Oh, I gotta be sweating.
there are some parts of the sewer system we'll have to address pretty soon, and that stuff will be from Spicer into the capital improvement plan, and then we can pretty much do most of those projects with the fund balance that sewer has. It's gonna be mostly cured in place piping, which is the stuff we did when we had those emergency repairs
Mhm.
last year, which is cost effective. There are a couple of traditional dig outs we will have to do based on how.
Okay, cause that stuff worked good, didn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
As far as I know, yeah, that saved them a lot of money versus open cutting it.
I
Mhm.
think the one that was up by Woodlawn and Sunview was like 20 feet deep. That would have cost us $150,000 to pay somebody to excavate that and do it. We ended up paying, I think it was $20,000 to have that
Yeah, it
cured
was
in
a
place
huge
pipe.
difference.
Yeah.
So most of our problems, that will be appropriate. Some, it may not be appropriate, but we'll have a recommendation from Spicer on that stuff.
When they were doing that work, did they find a problem over by the bank or the Advent Church, a county sewer or something that was
Oh, you're talking the county drain,
the drain?
Chestnut
Was there a
Street.
problem with that?
The whole thing?
Oh, okay.
There's
Well,
a-
I recall,
There's an issue with the drainage from the church parking lot and the county drain, and part of it's plugged, and the lady's garage floods, and we actually have a project in our, it's called Asana, but it's really a workflow process computer, thing, for them to go and do some drainage work over there, cause there's actually a road, there's like a couple hundred feet of road with there's like a storm drain underneath of it, or we think there's a storm drain under there,
Yeah,
we're gonna
yeah,
try to
yeah.
connect. We're gonna add a catch
You should.
basin and connect it
Yeah.
to the storm sewer so it drains instead of flooding the
Right.
lazy garage.
There's a county drain, the church's drain, and it's three pieces of the pie.
All in the
It's
same
all
area.
converged, yeah.
It's even better when you get out by the boat work.
Who does do you type up these minutes?
Which boat?
Watch your Roman numerals. Okay, and we went
Which boat?
from
The old
5
one.
to
The
11.
old
You
one.
mean my front yard?
Your front yard.
Oh, I didn't,
So instead of X's, so it
Well, they
should
must
be
have did
B's.
something.
Okay.
I did this
We
one,
haven't
but I
got-
did not notice the
screwed
Roman
up with
numerals.
Okay, then
Marguerite and I proofread it,
Well,
but
they
yeah, I
did
didn't
something with the ruts.
type that one out.
Because
Just make sure,
I'm
because
down
I'm
for
looking at
the
the numbers and I'm
Chesapeake.
thinking, wait a minute, and then it's like, okay.
They broke a couple cutters.
So, but that's actually all I've got. If, let me just run down the goals again.
Oh, there's no sixer.
Taking care of the contamination in parking lot. Number 2, improve the aesthetics of the village. 3, improve downtown streetscape and create plans for that. 4, continue park improvements and focus on pavilion roofs, coal miners park, universal play stuff, and then get some information on potentially adding a canoe livery. Number 5, continue asset management, investigate bond projects. And number 6, continuing from the previous year, street sign replacement project. And then under that I have gateway signs, and wayfinding signs, because those are the ones that we've been talking about for Dan Howman.
Mm-hmm,
So I threw that as a bullet point under that one. So
okay.
that's what I've got down there.
And before we leave, can you have a copy of the attachment to your contract?
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, I'll make copies of the signed contract with the attachment to it.
Okay, cool.
That way you guys will have the same
Oh,
thing.
okay.
Well, we need a donor while we're doing that.
I already have them.
Good job.
Go ahead, Luana.
You can just email it.
Yeah.
Yes, we have Mr.
Now to get
Mon-
up, right?
no.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
Well, I've been trying to keep all of these,
Painful.
and
You
it's
print
getting
all
to,
those? Do you print the emails up or just file them?
I print
Yeah,
sections of them,
I think
that
we
as I need it,
technically have-
but I was trying to keep everything, and it's
Oh.
getting where my pantry is 2 shelves of
Gotta do this.
3 years.
Okay. I make a motion, we adjourn.
We have to have.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting's adjourned.
I'll second it. Jenny.
Yeah.
Good deal, they're out at one.
It'll be fine.
Oh, my
We
leg.
just have a village president 2 years to get out of here and have a
Have a
donut.
good weekend, everyone.
See you
I'm not the village president. He
I
is
know.
already eating
That's
it.
what I'm saying. Couldn't wait for his second on his motion.
Yeah, I didn't eat none before.
I didn't
I didn't
either.
either.